Good morning and welcome for Armanino's 11th Annual Nonprofit Symposium. My name is Megan Kurtz. I'm a marketing manager here for Armanino, and I support the nonprofit industry group. Before we get started and I kick things over to our MC for the day, Jeff Owens, just want to cover a couple of housekeeping items as it relates to CPE credit. So before we begin, just keep in mind if you are logging in for CPE credit through Zoom, you need to have logged in through your Zoom link and make sure you answer all of those polling questions during today's broadcast. In addition, you will receive a post-event evaluation from Zoom at the completion. Make sure you complete that in order to get that CPE credit. If you're attending live from one of our watch parties in Chicago, Dallas, Austin, St. Louis, or Philadelphia, just make sure that you scanned in using that Conferences.io QR code. Feel free to check in with one of your watch party points of contact if you weren't able to do that yet. That way we can know that you have checked in, and you'll also want to make sure you use that same QR code to check out. And you will also receive a post-event evaluation to complete in order to get that CPE credit after today's broadcast. If you have any questions today, make sure you utilize that Q&A function in Zoom. We've got great team members here on our end keeping an eye on that Q&A box in case you have any questions or any technical issues. Just for those of you who may not be as familiar with Zoom, this is just a little snippet of that toolbar so you can see where that Q&A box if you have any questions. Feel free to type that in there and then hit send, and we will make sure to address it as quickly as we can. And now I'm going to hand things over to our host for the day, Jeff Owens. Jeff, take it away.
Thank you so much, Megan, and welcome friends and colleagues and clients. We are so excited to host our 11th annual Armanino Nonprofit Symposium. As Megan mentioned, my name is Jeff Owens. I'm a partner here at Armanino, and we absolutely love serving our nonprofit community by serving each of you. Each of the organizations represented here today are making such a positive impact in their community. We're grateful for you, and we're excited that you're here today. Today is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be looking forward today. We're going to be focusing on the future and some of the ways that you can prepare your organizations for those challenges that we know tomorrow is going to bring. We're ecstatic to be providing a first ever hybrid learning opportunity for our symposium. For those of you attending virtually, you heard Megan talk about some of the logistics of CPE and how to use today's technology platform, and please use that. Please submit questions. We're going to be reading those live here with some of our panelists later on. In addition to our virtual attendees, I want to welcome all of our watch parties in Austin, Chicago, Dallas, Philadelphia, and St. Louis. We're elated to be able to bring members of the community back together in person this year. This symposium is going to provide another outlet for those meaningful conversations, and we're going to look forward to the future and where we're heading next. So, speaking of where we're heading next, let's discuss today's agenda. So, first up, the objectives for our learning session, a requirement that I have to do because the CPE police will come at us if I don't. So Megan, let's put those CPE requirements up on the screen. Thank you. So for those of you, we're in a studio and those learning objectives are on the other side of the room. So if we can make that a little bit bigger so I can see it. Thank you. So during today's event, we're going to discuss how to use futurism. Yes, what is futurism? We got a great speaker that's going to tell us all about that today. But we're going to learn how to use futurism in our day-to-day work and identify trends really before they happen. We're going to examine the ways embracing digital transformation can maximize your mission effectiveness. We're going to identify how to answer environmental, social, and governance questions, those ESG questions that your board's asking, the stakeholders are asking. And ways to engage with your organization from an ESG perspective. We're going to explore the role that data and analytics can play in furthering your mission. The CP information is over there on the right. You can read that. So let's jump in and look at the agenda for today as well. We got a packed agenda. As I said, it's going to be a lot of fun and energetic. So we're going to jump into our keynote here in just a few seconds, and we're going to take a quick break. And then we have a great session about thinking fourth dimensionally. What is that? I don't know. We're going to figure out what that means. We'll then jump into another break, and then we're going to look at creating your future from an ESG perspective. And then we will look at your destiny from a social impact and data analysis perspective. And then we'll close and we'll send you back on your way for the rest of the day. So let's also, I can't forget this, our great sponsors today. This event would not be possible without these amazing sponsors. These companies love nonprofit organizations just as much as we do. So thank you, Sage Intact, TriNet, and Citibank. We couldn't do this event without them, so please show them love as well. All right, so let's get moving. Let's focus on the future. So we've spent so much time over the last 2 years, I know you have, I have, talking about COVID, the impact of COVID to the nonprofit community, and really reflecting on the lessons that we learned. It's going to be a great day for all of us when we don't have to say things like, remember when COVID hit, or pre-COVID this, pre-COVID that. Today, we're not going to do that. We're not going to look backwards. We're going to look forward today. And we have over 675 registrants from nonprofits across the nation attending today's event. And we're so grateful to have each of you and every one of you here today at this 11th annual Nonprofit Symposium. So we've come a long way since 2000, right? Or 2020, sorry. But we have a game-changing slate of interactive presentations and discussions around what's next: transformation, innovation, data and analytics, and future sustainability. So as you watch and participate in today's sessions, the one question we ask that you keep top of mind is this: what is your future? What does your future look like? So I'm so excited to introduce our keynote speaker for today, a close friend of mine, Trista Harris. Trista is a philanthropic futurist and nationally known as a passionate advocate for leaders in the philanthropic and nonprofit sectors. Her work has been covered by the Chronicle of Philanthropy, Forbes, CNN, the New York Times, and numerous social sector blogs. She also is the author of How to Become a Nonprofit Rockstar and Future Good. She's the president of an organization called Future Good, which is a consultancy focused on helping visionaries build a better future. So, Trista, with that, welcome. So excited. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Jeff. So happy to be here with you today. So I bet many of you have probably never met a philanthropic futurist before, so I'll tell you a little bit about how I got here. I had my very first job running a community foundation. I was 29 years old, and I had a little Post-it note on my desk that said, learn how endowments work, because I was responsible for it. I had no idea how it worked. And probably about 2 months into that job, the stock market collapsed. So this was 2008. Our endowment lost between 30 to 50% of its value, depending on the day. And our grantees were doing really amazing work in the community, and suddenly we had no dollars to give them, which is a terrifying place to be as a foundation leader. Around that time, my son was a little toddler, and we lived in Minneapolis at that point. And there's a bookstore there called the Wild Rumpus Bookstore, and it is filled with bunnies and cats and parrots and chickens. This is my son. Please do not tell him that I am sharing a picture of him wearing a chicken costume eating chicken nuggets, because he is now 18 and he would completely disown me. But he wanted to go to this bookstore, and it's one of those places that once you go, you're unable to leave because the kids are completely enthralled. And so there was a chair in the corner with a pile of books that other parents had sort of left behind as they were stuck in this baby utopia. And one of those books was about how to use futurism to get a business advantage during times of crisis. And I was like, this is a time of crisis that we're in. And so while we were sitting there, I read it front to back and realized that all of the tools of futurism that were being described were exactly what our grantees needed in this moment. And so we started to bring those tools to our grantees, and we helped them start to think about the future that they were working to create instead of the moment of crisis that we were living in. And as a result of that, in the next year and a half, our grantees had 10 legislative wins, the most in our organization's history, including marriage equity in the state of Minnesota, a homeowners bill of rights to deal with the mortgage foreclosure crisis, and alternative teacher certification to diversify our state's teaching force. And so it really lit this spark in me to start to bring these tools to the social sector, because when I was trying to figure out who is bringing futurism work to nonprofits and foundations, I wasn't able to find anybody. And so I started this journey where I learned as much as I could about the future, from folks that were working in other sectors and translated that for people that were working in the social sector. So I interviewed experts in dozens and dozens of fields: human genome mapping, disaster first response, health ethics, people that were doing virtual reality and asteroid mining. Who knew that asteroid mining was a thing? I studied strategic foresight at Oxford University, and then spent a lot of time at Singularity University and the Institute for the Future. And so all of this really helped to create a good background on what was coming next and what that means for people that do good for a living. About 4 years ago, I started Future Good. We're a consulting firm that helps visionary leaders build a better future. We do that through strategic planning and strategic visioning, cohort programs, online learning. For a long time, I was the only philanthropic futurist. I would love for there to be thousands and thousands and thousands of philanthropic futurists that work throughout the sector, because each of you are best positioned to understand the future of the issues that you're working on. So I'm going to share some of those tools with you today.
But before we get started, we've got our first polling question up. So if you are tuning in virtually, make sure that you are paying attention so that you can answer this polling question today. The first question is, how familiar are you with the concept of futurism? We'll give everybody a few seconds to get those answers in. You're very familiar, you've heard of it, or you've never heard of it, and you can't wait to learn more about it. So get those answers in for all of our virtual attendees. Give you guys just a couple more seconds to get those answers in. And we'll go ahead and close that poll. So it looks like the majority of our audience has never heard of it, but can't wait to hear more. So Trista, take it away.
Lovely. So first, a little bit of context. We are in a pandemic time, and that historically has been an in-between time. So our old ways of living and being don't exist anymore, but we're really unsure what the future is going to look like. It's sort of this fuzzy portal between one thing and the other. That is incredibly unsettling for humans that like predictable linear change, but it's also an incredible time to build the new. I think of it as sort of a chrysalis time. So a caterpillar goes into a chrysalis, it gets really dark, all their cells fall apart. It's probably a little terrifying. I'm wondering, like, has anybody told you this is what's going to happen? And then they emerge and they're a beautiful butterfly. And I think we are emerging into something better, but we don't yet know what it looks like. We're also living in a movement moment. So this is a time of racial reckoning throughout the country. And in these movement moments, change happens very, very quickly. And it's up to us as organizations to harness that outward momentum internally within our organizations.
All right, we're going to go ahead and launch our next polling question. So again, virtual attendees, make sure that you are paying attention here. Our next polling question: do you find yourself stuck on problems and unable to develop a solutions mentality as it relates to future issues impacting you and your organization? So let's take a moment, make sure we get those answers in. If you are tuning in from home, give everyone just a couple of seconds. And we'll go ahead and close that poll now. And it looks like the majority of the audience said yes, they get stuck on developing that solutions mentality. So Trista?
Perfect. I've got some solutions for you. So there is a 3-step process that I've developed that if you practice it consistently, it will help you both predict and shape the future of the communities that you're working on. First one is stop loving the problem. So this is that solutions mentality piece. Knowing the scope of the issue that you're working on is really important, but if you use up all your energy in that space, you're not going to have any time or energy to actually do anything about it. And it can be really counterproductive to spend your time that way. So we need a change in mindset in the social sector. I have worked in nonprofits since I was 13. And I cannot tell you the number of meetings that I have been in where we are loving the problem and describing the gap is this big and this is so terrible. It is the way that we have built the social sector, but I think we have to transform and change that. I was at a meeting once. Angela Glover Blackwell, who started PolicyLink, was coming to talk to a group of leaders in the Twin Cities, and Before she spoke, we had one of the members of our group sort of describe the disparities that exist in Minnesota. The racial disparities are this large in education and in health and in housing and in wealth and on, and it's sort of the generic disparities PowerPoint that I think any of you can do for the causes and communities that you care about. And so the person that presented sat down, and Angela got up and she said, thank you, so much for that great presentation, but for the audience, aren't you embarrassed? If I lived here, I would be embarrassed that these disparities exist. What are you doing about it? And I think what had happened in our community is that we were content with understanding that they were problems and really proud of ourselves for understanding those scope and funding studies and really sort of laying out what those issues look like. But we hadn't talked through what were we going to do to fix it. And so Stop Loving the Problem is about getting out of that space of constantly describing what's wrong and instead moving to a place of describing what it looks like if it's fully fixed. So there's a couple things that you can do in your day-to-day practice. One is stop making problems your guest of honor at events. So if you're hosting an event, make sure that the frame isn't, here is the huge challenge that we are working on. Have a solutions mentality when you're planning those events. Next, check your communication. So what are you building? Not how terrible everything is. What would it look like if the problem that you care about no longer exists? And then move backwards from that vision of the future so that you can describe what it takes to get there. Now, I will say that foundations who I work with often are the chief problem lovers in the field. Grant applications ask you to describe how the issue that you're working on is more terrible than another issue that they could possibly fund. I think it's our responsibility as organizations to move to the space where we talk about what we're building and creating. And when I talk to foundations, they're really excited about what that looks like, but there just hasn't been a frame to do it previously. So what I'd encourage you to do in the next week or so is think about, in your own ideal future, what does the impact of your work look like in 30 years? If you were fully successful, if your organization fully met its mission, what would it look like externally? What would be the transformative change that happens in community? And what would your organization have to look like internally to make that true? That's really what gives you that pathway to the future. We have an organization that we did strategic planning with that does educational after-school programs with kids. And when we asked them to envision that 30-year future, they realized that the future that they wanted to see was that kids didn't need to do academic programs after school, that they could hang out with their friends and ride their bikes and have a great time, that they were getting everything that they needed during the school day. So their regular goal of serving 5% more kids every year was never going to get them to that ideal future. Now, because they're not in that ideal future yet, it doesn't mean you just sort of cancel the program and don't do the work, because you've got to do what it takes to get there. But you need to make sure that you're devoting energy to the place that will actually get you to that future. So what they decided to do is, of course, continue the expansion of their program, but they also invested organizational resources in some lobbying work to make sure that schools had the dollars that they needed. And then for training for teachers, they had a really unique educational model for students, and they wanted to make sure that they were sharing that with teachers. Doing those things at the same time is what's going to take you to that ideal future that you've laid out. So for yourself, think about what that future looks like. The next step is look. So you can't just be flexible when change happens to you. You need to anticipate that change and prepare for it before it happens. So how do you do it? There's a saying, today is giving you clues about tomorrow, or the future is already here, it just isn't evenly distributed. And that is very true. There are places in the country and places in the world that are already living the future that you've envisioned. And so keeping an eye out and paying attention to that is really important. I encourage people to spend 5% of their time on R&D, research and development. If you were in the for-profit sector and you said, oh yeah, we don't invest any time in R&D, it would be ridiculous, you wouldn't exist. But in the nonprofit sector, we don't create that space to envision something different and to have a space for creative solutions. And so in that 5% time, just a couple hours a week, I often use that time at the end of the week when it's a little bit quieter. Set a Google alert for you. So future of whatever you're interested in, future of transportation, future of education, future of your city. And with that Google alert, you're going to start to get a bunch of information that's coming at you that is sort of a stream that helps you consider something different. And for some folks, they're old school, they want a regular notebook. You sort of write notes for yourself about what you are noticing in those ideas that come towards you. What does that mean for your organization? What does that mean for the sort of field that you are in? For other folks, they use Evernote notebooks or an electronic notebook where you can sort of sort articles and keep notes for yourself. But in that time, you're paying attention to innovations that exist to make sure that you can see what's coming. The other place to pay attention to innovations is outside of your field. So I like to use TED Talks as a resource. So when you're looking for innovation, it's actually a little bit easier when you find innovation that's outside of your field, because often you're all going to the same conferences, you're listening to the same speakers. It may be the same group of solutions that's in front of everybody. So how do we make sure that we're pulling in new ideas? So I used to run a membership association of foundations, and we had this issue where we were trying to engage our members in our programming, and we're trying to figure out how to do a better job. So I picked a random TED Talk, and it happened to be The Power of Introverts. And so I watched the TED Talk and thought, what does this mean for our membership? And what I realized is all of our programs were set up get the most out of the session. And if you weren't willing to do that, you didn't get as much out of the programs. And so we built something called the Hub, which was like Facebook for foundations, where after a program, the PowerPoint was there, all of the notes were there, and there was an ongoing conversation about the topic. And some of our more introverted members were the most active on the Hub and really led in that space of showing new resources and new ideas. And we never would have had that experience if we didn't reach out in a new way. So picking that random TED Talk when you're dealing with a sticky problem may help you just find a completely new solution to get there. As you're keeping track of these signals and trends that you are noticing out in the field, figure out ways to share it within your organization. Some of our clients use Slack, and they can keep track of trends there. They just use a little hashtag signals or hashtag trends. Some use Chatter that's in Salesforce. There are lots of places where you can just start to get a steady stream of what folks are noticing. The look step is really paying attention to see signals of the future in your present. And I'm going to share a few of the trends that I'm noticing right now that I think might be important for your work. The first is, unfortunately, disruption is the norm. So we are not going to sort of go back to a calmer time. We're living in a time of exponential change. So the curve of change sort of looks like this. It gets more intensive and faster over time, which is ever so exhausting. It's a really unsettling time where change happens very quickly, but it isn't temporary. And so that means that we have to build our capacity to thrive during times of disruption. And the ways that we can build our organizations for disruption are, one, to have a very clear set of values that's shared across board, staff, volunteers, participants. The second is to have a very clear North Star of where you're going, because you can actually harness that volatility during times of change to get there faster. We have a number of clients that we worked with before the pandemic, and during the pandemic, they were actually able to take that moment and move a lot faster towards their goals. One of them wanted to be a statewide organization. They were really nervous about what it would look like to have staff that were not based in their central office. How would they develop relationships with the different schools that they worked with? When the pandemic happened, they immediately decided that they were going to invest in virtual work for the long term and that it was worth that initial commitment. And they were able to hire staff that were throughout the state. And so something that was a 10-year goal for them ended up being something that happened in a 6-month time period. So disruption can be really, really useful if you know where you're going. The next is a call to accountability. So there is a growing awareness of the issues and inequalities in our society. People are speaking up, they're calling for change, and they're asking to be involved in decision-making like never before. Nonprofits are not immune to these calls for community accountability, and deep community relationships build trust when organizations are working on hard problems. So I think that the sector should really lean into this idea of being accountable to community and build your capacity to be able to do that in the long term, not just in reaction when your organization's been called to the carpet. The next is skills for the future. So if you took Laura Ingalls Wilder from Little House on the Prairie and you put her in a Target, she'd lose her mind. There are a million shampoos, there's fluorescent lights, there's like so much going on. She'd have no idea where she was. If you put her in a school, she would know exactly what to do. The desks are lined up the exact same way. There's a teacher in front telling you what to do. You sort of mimic what is happening in the front. And that is not what we need in the future from our workforce or from students. So when I talk to educational futurists, they say that we need kids that are able to partner with technology, that are able to remix two technologies and turn them into something different, and kids that are able to work in a global workforce and have global cultural competency. I think we have a ton of students that are really great at this, but we haven't built our school system to be able to harness that. And so we've had some practice during the pandemic of envisioning new ways of doing education. I think because the systems are so ingrained, we've sort of immediately moved back to where we were before. It's an opportunity to continue to stretch and to flex and to figure out what do we need in the future for kids and what do we need in the future for workforce. The next is reimagining cities. So this is a picture from Uber for their flying car landing pads. So imagine these replacing regular car parking ramps throughout your city because people are using self-driving cars to get where they need to go, that are about 1/10 of the cost of owning a car yourself. And so you don't need parking ramps because these self-driving cars are moving around and there's no need to have personal cars that are parked. Flying cars are the sort of last mile part of that solution where if there is traffic on freeways or if you live in a geographic area where it's hard to get over rivers or that sort of thing, it can help get to that last piece. So we've got a polling question about when you think that these flying cars will happen.
Yes, and I just wanted to acknowledge, I know I'm getting your feedback in the Q&A. I know the last polling question was a little quick. We hear you, we see you. Don't worry about your CPE credit, we've got you. We can see that you've been logged in, we know you're here. Don't worry about that. But this is gonna be our third polling question, so while I have your attention, when do you think that flying cars will become a reality? 2025, 2030, 2040, 2050? So we'll give everyone just a moment to ponder the flying car question and get those answers in. Again, don't worry, if you are logged in, we can see your login time on Zoom. So don't fret about that CPE credit. We will make sure that you get that. Let's get those answers in. Give everybody about 10 more seconds. Okay, let's go ahead and close that polling question. So it looks like the majority of the audience guessed 2050 on flying cars. Trista?
Perfect. So flying cars are testing next year in LA and Austin. And I think we often have in our head that this sort of technological future is far away, that it's sort of the Jetsons 100 years from now. This is what our cities are, these are what our cities are going to look like. That exponential pace of change means that technology changes at a pace that we can't even imagine as humans. There are developments that are happening with Hyperloop, sort of big freeways underneath cities that can be used to move around freight. There are already self-driving semi-trucks that are on the roads and are being developed. And so our infrastructure of cities is changing right in front of us. And there's big questions when this kind of infrastructure goes private. Who wins, who loses, who has access, where are these things placed in our city? And what is our role as nonprofits to be a part of these conversations? So how do we stay on top of this technological change so that we can really be in the corner of our communities and make sure that they're winning in these changes as well? So the last trend is new impact tools. So we are moving to a time where organizations are being really thoughtful, not just about their external impact, but how we operate as organizations. Nonprofits are a financial force in our communities, and let's make sure that the ways that we spend and invest our dollars are aligned with those values. I think that we're going to move towards a time where nonprofits and foundations are 100% mission and program related invested, so that every dollar that you have is moving forward the causes that you care about. That we're investing in banks that are strengthening our communities, and we're making sure that those dollars are being loaned out in small business loans, affordable housing loans. And then for organizations that are able to do mission and program related investments, they can do their own funds or partner with other organizations for small business loans, affordable housing, bridge loans to nonprofits as they wait for reimbursement from government reimbursements or services that they've already done. I think it's important that we move to a time where the way that we do our work is 100% aligned with the change that we want to create in the community. And what that means is a lot more dollars flowing around the sector to create change. It isn't about what is the slice of pie that we're fighting for, it's about how to make that pie a whole lot bigger. So the last step is go. We need to learn to fail faster, and I know that that is very counterintuitive, and many of you will say, we are working with the most marginalized communities, we can't possibly fail them, and so we can't lean on this edge of innovation. And what I will very gently say is that we're failing those communities just very slowly. So as the pace of change gets faster and things get worse faster, if we have a linear model of impact, we're less and less effective over time. And so that means we need to try out some of the new ideas that we've found in that look step. What is the minimum model that you need to be successful? And then how do you go back and refine and constantly implement and constantly change? It's the only way that we can get in front of these curves. And then how do you share what you're learning, both within your institution and within the field? The good, the bad, the ugly. We love to say when it worked well. I think it is even more important that we talk through what doesn't work so that another organization doesn't bump their head in the exact same place. I think the most important thing is we can't be afraid of failure.
All right, this is our fourth and final polling question for this session. So let me make sure that I've got everyone's attention, especially my virtual attendees, wherever you are tuning in from. In my current position, I feel empowered about helping my organization move toward a positive future. True or false? We're hoping you feel empowered, particularly after Trista's presentation, but let's get those answers in, and then we're going to move into a really great Q&A session with Jeff and Trista. So get those answers in. In my current position, I feel empowered about helping my organization move toward a positive future. We'll give everybody about 10 more seconds. All right. Let's go ahead and close that polling question. That's great. 90% of you said true. So you are feeling empowered about helping your organization move toward a positive future. Let's kick it back to Jeff and Trista to talk more about that.
Some discussion that you just led us through. You've given us all so much to think about. There's so many takeaways from that conversation. I wrote down something you said, that disruption is the norm. We live in this volatile and uncertain world that's full of change, right? And so if we're not changing and adapting within our organizations, we're falling behind. So what a great discussion. So there were a lot of great questions that came in from some of our people online. And so I just wanted to run through some of those because I'd love to get your thoughts on these. So somebody asked, what are you hopeful about in the future, specifically in the philanthropic space? Yeah,
for sure. I think I've seen more change in the philanthropic sector in the last 3 years than I've seen in my entire career in the field. Often philanthropy is seen as something that is sort of unmoving and stagnant. There are these endowments, they're intended to last forever, which means that change is really difficult. And a lot of the work that we do with our philanthropic clients is to help them innovate and change. And what we heard before 2020 is, oh, we'd love to, but we've got these systems and it is difficult, and how could we possibly do that? And what I saw in 6 weeks in the spring in 2020 is that almost every foundation in the country was able to immediately transform their grant-making practices. They were able to get dollars out really quickly. They were able to be responsive to what community needs were. They eliminated grant reports and other things so that organizations could really immediately focus on what does the community need from us at this time? And because this crisis has been ongoing, it means that that flexibility is actually now baked into these foundations. It isn't a sort of quick and fast one-time sort of thing. This is a long-term crisis. And that means that that sort of innovation and flexibility is actually the way that it works now in many of these institutions. So I am very hopeful about what the future of philanthropy looks like. I've got a future of philanthropy model that I developed probably about 5 years ago. I thought it would be about a 10 to 15 year model. We're already there. So that exponential change that we talked through previously, they were able to sort of harness that and create the change. So I'm really hopeful about what's happening next in the philanthropic field and what that means for nonprofits and the support of the great work that they're doing.
Yeah, we've heard it said a lot that today is the slowest day of the rest of your life.
That's
right?
very true. Yeah.
So, well, you mentioned 2020. So I'm really interested in this question. Did you see the pandemic coming?
So here's what I will embarrassingly say. So for probably about 5 years before the pandemic, I had a slide that I would often share at events like this, and it had a picture of 2 folks in an airport wearing masks, and the headline was, "Global pandemics are much more likely." And that was based on the fact that we travel a lot more internationally, we are encroaching in natural areas, and so there's a lot more opportunities for diseases to flow from animals to people and that sort of thing. But because I'm optimistic about the future, what I thought would happen is that you would you'd travel to Brazil, you would come back, you would be sick, and your doctor would say, "I don't know what's going on, I haven't seen this before." And they would Skype with a doctor in Brazil, and they would come up with a solution, and it would be great, and everybody would go home. I did not expect an entire financial global shutdown and all that is followed after that. But what futurism gives you is a picture of possibilities. And so that was a possibility that was sort of on my bingo card of what could happen. And when it did happen, I realized that it was not going to be a quick and fast sort of thing. And so immediately cut my lease in my shared workspace, built out an office in my home, moved all of our work to Zoom and virtual. And a good friend of mine, a couple weeks after the pandemic started, Future Good started doing trainings, free trainings for the nonprofit sector about scenario planning around the pandemic. And she's like, "I am curled up in the fetal position. How are you like developing programs?" And I said, the first week I was for sure in the fetal position. And then when you see that there is a path forward, it makes it easier to move to action. So it isn't that it isn't difficult. It's that you understand that it's worth investing the energy in that time because you can see the bigger picture of what's coming next.
Sure. Wow, that's interesting. So you've talked a lot today and in your book about disruption, and particularly disruption in fundraising. So what's next on the horizon? What should we expect for changes in fundraising?
Yeah, I think we're going to have much better data.
Okay.
So I was a fundraiser very early in my career, and we had file cabinets full of information that was 10 years old about donors' capacity to give. And we would go to other organizations and take pictures of their donor wall as our prospect, researching that sort of thing. We have a lot of really amazing predictive tools that help you understand if a donor likes this topic, they may also be interested in this topic. There's also,
like Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. If you're shopping for this, you might like this. There is also more opportunity to understand social networks. So 7 or 8 years ago, there's this amazing tool that I used for an organization, a community foundation that I led, where it could tell from your Facebook contacts who else of your donor base, who else might be interested in your work based on the sort of things that they posted about. And we were able to work with this company to do a targeted campaign to sort of friends of friends. And Facebook shut that down very quickly. So they did not like their information being used that way. But I think the capability to do that sort of donor prospecting exists in that way that it hasn't before. We also have trends where 2 things happen at the same time. So I think we're going to continue to have the rise of the mega donors that are giving humongous gifts to large numbers of organizations or a small number of organizations. And then we are also going to have very small gifts that roll up into something very transformative. And so organizationally, it's important to have a plan for both of those. And I think for the small donors, it's how do you build the infrastructure to be able to cultivate and to understand those folks, because you have no idea who in that $25 donor pool could be $1 million donor. And then for the mega donors, which everybody likes to think about, like, what would we do if we got those dollars? I think that question that we had earlier, what would success look like 30 years from now? for those groups that have gotten the Mackenzie Scott gifts, we're working with a number of them. We're helping them develop a picture of what long-term transformative change looks like, and how do you take this moment of significant investment and make sure that that future happens a lot faster than you ever imagined possible.
So interesting. So you've been a futurist now for a while. I'm wondering, how does one become a futurist? But were you interested in the future when you were a kid?
Yeah, so I was thinking back, in my elementary school library, there was this book that I've been trying to find and haven't been able to. So if any of you know this book, please send me a message and let me know what it is. But it was sort of pictures of the future. And it was kind of like an encyclopedia. And so it would show cities that were on the ocean. It would show flying cars. It would show all of these different kind of possibilities. And I remember being a kid and realizing that the world was a lot more flexible than I imagined, that if you could have a city that was in the middle of the ocean, what would that look like? And one of the examples that they gave was a cruise ship that was a city. And it had a park that was on the top, and it had a school, and it had all these sort of things. And a few years ago, I was in Miami, and there is a cruise ship that people live on permanently, and it was docked where we were. And I was like, that's that thing that I saw when I was 7. There's a group of people that are sort of living in this mobile way and able to explore the world differently than, I would have imagined.
Well, you talk about flying cars being tested next year. I hope they stay away for a while, because I like driving on the road, not interested in a flying car, but we'll see. So in your book, there was a phrase that really stuck out to me about being persistently adaptable. Tell me a little bit about what that means, specifically around like a nonprofit organization.
I gave a talk years and years ago where I talked about these kind of big fast trends and change and that sort of thing. And one of the people in the audience said, I'm so glad I'm retiring soon so I don't have to deal with any of this. And I was like, are you still going to be on Earth? You're still going to be impacted by all of these changes. And I think we've gotten complacent over time, and it felt like, this is what it was like for my parents growing up, and this is what it'll feel like for me, and it will all be the same. And that was the case for most of human history. It literally was, if your parents were farmers, you were a farmer. And the world is so different than it was even when I was in college. I mean, I used to have to go to the library to access a computer, and there's a special password to use the internet. It was like this whole process that is nothing like what things look like for my kids, and I can't even imagine what it's going to look like for their kids. And so we've got to build this resiliency and ability to be flexible when change happens, and to be able to create the future that we're hopeful for. So we can sort of sit back and wait and say, are we going to get a Hunger Games future? Are we going to get a Star Trek future? But I think we get to decide that in the ways that we invest our time and our dollars and the sort of work that our organizations are doing. We get to make the future better.
Wow. Well, Trista, this has been great. I'm so appreciative you being here today and talking to our audience about your journey as a philanthropic futurist. You're the first one I met, but man, it's such a powerful conversation. And, I think we just need to embrace the change, right? We know it's coming. We got to be ready to receive it when it comes, and being nimble as an organization, be ready to adapt, is being persistently adaptable, as you mentioned. So thank you so much for coming today and talking to us, and really in a really positive way. You've set up the rest of our symposium today with your keynote presentation. We got a lot of great sessions that are going to follow that are going to kind of build upon what Trista said today. So thank you for that. So before we move any further along, I just want to take a quick moment again to thank some of our sponsors here today, Sage Intact and Citibank and TriNet. These are extremely valuable partners to Armanino and to the nonprofit community as well. So we're just really thankful for them and for their contributions today as well. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, which is great, right? It's never a bad thing to be ahead of schedule, but we're going to take a quick break. So this is a chance to step out, grab some coffee, use the restroom, do whatever you need to do. We're going to come back here at 11 o'clock Central. So it's about 15 minutes from now. So if you have any questions that you want to put into the chat, please feel free to do that. We'll be back at 11 o'clock, and we'll continue on with our next session. Thank you.
Thanks,
Trista.
Appreciate it.
We're just a little bit ahead of schedule. We changed that break slide to note that we'll be back at 11. So just a little 1-minute warning for everybody to kind of get back to their computer, get back to your seat if you're at one of our watch parties, and kind of get settled. And we will be gearing up for our next session in just a moment.
All right, well, welcome back. I hope you had a great break. You were able to refill that coffee cup and stretch those legs. We've got a great session here coming up. So I'm just gonna jump right into it, and I'd like to introduce you to 3 extraordinary gentlemen. John Stewart's a partner at Armanino and leads our strategy and transformation practice. He's also here today with John Mcbride, the CFO of Nasher Sculpture Center here in Dallas, and Thomas Brewer, who's the Vice President of Finance and Administration at the Ralph M. Parsons Foundation. Nasher Sculpture Center and Ralph M. Parsons Foundation are both Armanino clients, and John's here today to talk us through each of their stories, including ways they've embraced new and innovative technology to empower their teams and better deliver on their missions, which is all of our goals. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to John, and let's get started.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Pleasure to be here. Before we get rolling, I do think we have a couple polling questions we're gonna handle first. Megan, please take it away.
Yep, we are going to do polling questions just a little bit differently this time because we want to make sure that we've got a lot of time for the meat of the discussion for these gentlemen. So we're going to launch 2 polling questions here at the beginning, and then we're going to bookend with 2 more polling questions at the end. So for all of my virtual attendees, our first polling question. I have a firm understanding of my organization's strategic vision and believe we're structured for future success. True, there's room for improvement, or we lack a firm strategic plan. Let's go ahead and get those answers in. Give everybody plenty of time to answer those polling questions. Make sure we've got your attention. I know some people like to multitask, whether you're virtual or in person, so make sure you're paying attention to these polling questions. I have a firm understanding of my organization's strategic vision and believe we are structured for future success. Give you guys about 10 more seconds. Get those answers in. Okay. I think we can probably close that one. All right. So a little split here. 51% said yes. 44% said there's room for improvement, and that's great because we hope to talk to you some about that today. Let's go ahead and move on to our next polling question. Do you have a wide understanding of technologies like AI and robotic process automation that can improve your efficiencies and operations? Yes or no? Do you have a wide understanding of technologies like AI and robotic process automation that can improve your efficiencies and operations? Make sure you're getting those answers in. We'll give everybody maybe 10 or 15 more seconds. Make sure we've got your attention for our polling questions. Get those answers in. Okay, I think we can probably close that one. All right, 75% said no, they don't have a wide understanding of these kinds of technologies. Well, I know that's going to be one of many really interesting things that John and Thomas are going to cover today. So John, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Megan. Oh, that's great to hear. So we are going to explore some of those topics right now. As mentioned, John Stewart, partner at Armanino. I run our strategy and transformation practice for the firm based out of Los Angeles. Pleasure to be here today with 2 very good colleagues of mine and clients, and I had a ton of excitement working with both of you over the past several years with Thomas and John. So why don't we start first with your introductions and your backgrounds, and we'll start with Thomas.
Well, good afternoon or morning, depending where you are in the country. I'm Thomas Brewer. I'm the Vice President in Finance and Administration with the Ralph M. Parsons Foundation. We're based in Los Angeles, and we're a private grant-making foundation that works specifically in LA County. We have assets at a peak of about 460 million. Today, it's closer to about 410 million. And we do private grant-making to nonprofits in Los Angeles County. That entails basically about 20 million, so about 5% of our active endowment that goes out to nonprofits in Los Angeles County, and that's translates into about 400 grants per year. That means we are seeing a lot of volume and activity, and so my team, which is really a small, lean team, is cutting checks, at one point in time cutting checks, we'll talk about that, cutting checks of about 400 a year, as well as making payments to other organizations and vendors. What I think we'll talk about is really how did we have a value at the organization. It's a $38 million operation on an annual basis, and we prefer to be lean and mean, meaning that there's only 15 employees to process that $38 million budget, and my department, which is the finance team, is only 3. We were seeing an expansion, and I'll talk more about that later.
I remember that first conversation when you told me 3, and we paused, right?
We did pause, and you're thinking, how are we going to, the value we have is really lean and mean so that the money is actually going out into community, and I'll talk more about that later.
Great, thank you, Thomas. John, tell us about yourself.
My name is John Mcbride. I've been the Chief Financial Officer for the National Sculpture Center for the past 14 years. And we are a small to medium-sized modern and contemporary museum based here in the Arts District in Dallas. Opened in 2003, featuring, Mr. Nasher and Mr. and Mrs. Nasher's personal collection, as well as exhibitions from modern and contemporary sculptors. Our main focus right now has been kind of like your lean and mean. We've always kind of been what I'd call strategically understaffed, and trying. It's
a nice way of putting it.
Yes, stretched a little thin.
Yeah.
But kind of on purpose to drive the best value we can for the donors. And we've been embracing technology for the last several years to make that work, because without it we're kind of stuck in the mud. So.
And the thing about that always struck me is like it's a beautiful facility you have, right? We spent some time there, and I got to enjoy it as well. And it is interesting. We're going to get into it, right? How do you continue to drive that efficacy, have people coming more and more and really reach out into the community when you have such a beautiful facility? How do we capitalize on that, right?
And we're much smaller. We have about a $15 million budget, and a full-time staff of about 35 people, which for an open to the public facility is a very tight org chart. And so looking at that, trying to maximize our efficiencies while minimizing our headcount. It requires partnerships, it requires cleverness, and it requires kind of compromise, to make everything work.
Well, I think that's perfect setup for both of you. Thank you to what we're going to talk about today, which is how do we navigate this change? How do we future-proof, right? So we'll start with that. We'll start with future-proofing. We've both had discussions, right, over the past several years around technology and how you can best utilize it. So you've both taken a very forward approach to improving both of your businesses in that manner. So I'd love to hear a little bit what excites you most right now about your business, and how will technology help you achieve that? Let's start with John.
What excites me most about technology is, keeping in mind that we're coming from our original tech stack, and so it's 20 years old.
Right.
And so what I'm most excited about is having a modern platform, and then being able to grow from there. We have over the years, as the organization has grown and changed, you can see how we've compromised our processes and our procedures and just our ability to get our job done to accommodate that growth and change.
And it's not easy, right? Once you get embedded in these processes, it's really hard to pause, stop, make a turn, right? It's not an easy thing to do.
It's just very difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
And so, we looked at that and saw how we were doing multiple, data entry into multiple systems, countless spreadsheets, and handing paper back and forth between each other, and just choking on it, quite frankly. And then just knowing that, so what excites me, to get back to your question, is that we're going to clean up a lot of those processes, break a lot of those processes, build new ones, that are leaner, that are quicker, more effective, more secure, and then look at where we can go from there. You know, where we at 18 months ago was looking inward, trying to maintain our status quo. And what I'm hoping, what we're going to find here in a few weeks after we go live, is that as soon as we understand our systems and go up the learning curve, that we're able to look outward and say, okay, now our focus can be on our mission, more on our donors, more on our engagement in the community, on the art.
Well, you've set a modern technology platform. You now can utilize it. You can capitalize on it.
Right? And so and meet the expectations of kind of both our constituency and our employees. And that's we were falling short, and I think that's something that kind of gets missed is the employee experience was also poor. And so that's something we're trying to improve.
And I think that's something we often don't maybe emphasize enough, right? Like we talk about technology and yes, we're going to change processes, we're going to improve things, but we don't often talk about that employee experience. It does matter.
Oh, absolutely.
Culture matters today, particularly in the not-for-profit space, right?
And particularly in the not-for-profit space, in the creative space, the people we hire are artists, they're educators, they're passionate about the mission, and they're very smart, very highly educated people. Right. And they have expectations, and then you come to them with a clumsy, tool and an antiquated tool, and it feels like a roadblock to them. Yeah. And so
it slows down that passion.
It slows down their passion. It slows down that work, and it just doesn't fit their expectation. And we're finding that more and more and more with the workforce, with our workforce, that had become an impediment.
I think that's a fantastic kind of aha to say, hey, technology can enable culture change too. Yeah. Right. That's great. So thank you, John. That's a fantastic way to explain it. Thomas, tell us more about your experience and how you're capitalizing on that technology.
Sure. So I think first, future-proofing kind of to the question is how I got into the role. I had been on the program direct care side for most of my career, and we had a transition with our CFO. Again, an organization 36 years old at the time, had very, what I'll call archaic systems. They were disparate in that they were all Excel spreadsheets. And I walked in not knowing how the place had worked. So for me, looking at this, that was not modern. It was not customer friendly. It was not transparent. And while we were working and finding nothing was broken, it was like, how do I future-proof this? Because I don't know how long I'll be here. I was an interim CFO, and was thinking, what do I do to leave some imprint on this? And working with the team that I had was really just myself and another person at that point in time. Was thinking this isn't going to be sustainable the way it was working. So we actually in 2018 engaged you and your team and others to look at our strategy. And we were really in a QuickBooks platform that was really enterprise-based.
I remember that discussion too.
That was not going to survive, which it didn't survive. Right. We moved to the cloud-based system, and I found it was just clunky. And it wasn't where we were headed. We actually grew from 8 people to 16 people within just a short period of time. Our investment strategy was changing. We currently had, at that time, only 25 funds, and we are now 83 funds. And that's all private and alternative investments, which really changed the portfolio in terms of lag time of knowing what your actual statements look like, and how things are moving in the market. So I needed something much more robust. And I needed transparency, both at the board level, but I also needed transparency at my level. Being that I wasn't going to be the day-to-day person because I'm not an accountant. And I needed something that worked between the two worlds of what would be board, management, as well as
I think you're speaking to a really key point here, that the technology you were looking at, it really has to enable the mission of the organization. This is truly a supporting function, right?
Right.
And if the technology is not enabling that kind of support, the mission's going to suffer too.
Yeah, and it needed to last beyond me because I didn't know how long I was going to be there. Fortunately, I did a good job, and they kept me.
I think you've done a fantastic job. Yeah.
So, and I really want to give credit to those of who I know viewing me who really did the heavy lift in this, because I don't do the day-to-day accounting. I just set the mission and give charge to it. But what I think was really fascinating as we did kind of the whole year, kind of looking at how we were operating and looking at our pieces, it was the engagement of the team to look at what was working, what wasn't working. And I think was interesting into the question that we had around AI and this whole notion of RPA, which is robotic processing or automation, was there fear? Because when we talk about artificial intelligence, we tend to think of replacement of people.
Right, which is not the case in this situation, but it feels that way when you talk about it.
Well, when we think of the auto industry, we really
Right.
tend to think of, are we replacing robots with people who put and weld things together?
But that's not what we're really talking about at all, right?
Yeah, not at all. What this really allowed our team to do was move from what would be manual entry and hours of literally keyboarding and what I would call boring and not productive work, or really engaging work, but really moving them into what would be analytic and strategic work, which is really what we were talking about with engagement and how people really want to work in the workplace.
Well, let's go into that, Thomas, because I think that's a great topic, and it was a polling question as well. Talk about the RPA experience, the impact it's had on people and process. Yeah, walk me through it, because I know it and I'm excited for it. I think you and your team have just been wonderful to watch and how you've embraced it, but I think it'd be great for the audience to hear all of that.
Sure. So
I'll tell you, I'm in that 75% of people that have
There we
no
go.
idea what.
There we go. John wants to know too.
Yeah.
So there we go.
So, I have an accounting manager, and as we move from 25 to now 83 funds, we get statements that are either on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, and sometimes even further because they don't really get to us on time. And we're trying to get K1s and try to do our Form 990s and all that. But she would spend on a monthly or quarterly basis trying to reconcile these statements, and they're disparate. They never look the same. They're all use different phrasing and all of that. And she would spend close to 80 to 100 hours trying to do a quarter end close.
That's a lot of time.
It's a
lot of time.
Mind
Let's
you, we're
underscore
still
that.
doing all of the
That's a
rest of
lot
the
of
regular
time.
work. And so when I thought about how is this going to go as we continue to build out our portfolio of privates and alternative investments, and who knows where we'll stop if the market continues to grow, which I'm hoping it will eventually turn around, and it should. I would need another full-time person, and we're talking anywhere between 150,000.
And if you talk about
200,000.
it, today's about futurism, the past mentality was, let's throw some people at it.
Yeah, totally.
But in the future perspective, it's how we use the people with technology, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So my lean and mean kind of values is I don't have the resources for that. We would rather have that go out as a grant because we would rather have people served in LA County. So I needed a tool and I needed a way to do that. And the RPA process allows
That was
us
the
to
first
do it.
conversation we had, right? I was
Yeah.
like, Thomas, I think I've got something for you.
You did.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, tell me a little more about it.
Yeah.
And basically what it is it is a robot.
Yep, it's a bot.
It's
Yep.
a bot that sits in your server and works 24/7. You can have it do multiple functions. And the first function that we wanted it to do was actually read these statements. And they would be able to come in, we file them as a PDF. The robot knows they arrive and actually can read and scan and make a journal entry and record what actually the earnings and
I told you, John, it was impressive.
is
Yeah, like he just sat up a little bit. So there you go.
So, it's not the panacea that, it happens overnight,
Right.
but you have to teach this robot or this bot to understand what the statement is. Every statement's different, so you have to teach it and it learns. And now we are in the process of, we've done 2020, we're in the process of teaching it 2021. It has learned 83 statements, and it is making journal entries for us. Now, my team has to do that work with the support of Armanino.
Right.
And, the bot, like a human being, has to learn.
Have you named the bot? Critical
have,
question.
we
I knew you
have,
did. What's
we
the
have.
name? Tell us the name.
Well, at first, now we've got a few more men on the team, but at first it was an all-female staff, and with me being the exception, and we named it Fabio.
Ah, nice. See, everybody names the bot. You're not alone in this. I always find that interesting.
So we actually have a whole Fabio product clothesline. He has spring apparel, summer
I love
apparel.
it. Fabio is living the dream right now.
Living the dream.
That's
we actually have
fantastic.
a real Fabio that rolls down. If you want a beverage, he'll bring a beverage to you.
See, John, I told you this is gonna change everything.
It changes morale.
This is incredible.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. So that was our first rollout of the RPA. The second piece is we actually have a grant-making database, and it is effective for the other side of the house. This is all the management of our database, but it does not have an accounting function whatsoever. And I did not have the visibility around what our encumbered dollars, which is a commitment of future orientation or our liability of grants going forward. And we would do this manual entry pull out, and it was just always clunky. And the data, to be quite honest, was never truly reliable because there was always human error element in it. And we used the RPA process, the bot, to actually pull the data and become a synchronization of the data, both from payments back into the system, and actually also the documentation that goes with our payment process. So now in real time, I can actually see what our grants team has done encumberment, and I can see it actually in a commitment book.
And this goes back to enabling the mission. So
Yes.
technology is enabling you to have that
Yes.
speed of change to keep up with it, right?
And it's in real time. So I literally can walk in the morning and see, oh, here we are. Do not have to access the grants database, which I love and I know how to do it, but it's more in my line.
What
of
should you be
thinking.
doing is the question, right?
Yeah,
There's
I
another
don't
thing-
want to
right,
be doing.
right, yeah.
Exactly.
I'd like to revise my opening statement. What I'm excited about now is not that stuff I said, what he's talking about.
Okay, you're excited about that. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, that's suddenly now very interesting.
That's fantastic. I think it's a great story, and I know it's been a pleasure working with your team too. You know, Judy Clark on my team, like she's thoroughly enjoyed that project, as she did with you as well. And yeah, that's fantastic to hear. Fabio is doing great. That's fantastic.
And we have more plans for Fabio.
Oh, well, even better. That's great. All right, so John, let's transition to you. One area we've talked about in the past is how can you better interact with your member and donor relationships inside the museum as you go through. So walk us through your perspective on how technology can help enable that and what you're thinking right now in regards to that.
And that's perfect, because really, as we're implementing this, what I'm thinking right now is very different than what I had thought earlier in the process. And you know, when you're going through this and you're learning about the capabilities, you know, things become about you know, targeting or, you know, somehow amplifying your knowledge and your just, you know, that donor relationship.
Right.
And as we get closer to this, and as I see the capabilities of what's happening, it's less and less about that and more about, well, there's kind of like three things. There's three levels of, like among the general membership, you can see how having a little bit of extra knowledge about their interests, about their interaction with our institution might help kind of ladder them up the membership levels and increase their engagement. And then, you know, you think about at the higher level donors, you know, we really, you look at what this is all capable of,
Right.
and you really have to avoid kind of the temptation, I think, of putting like a GPS lock on the back of your donors.
Right.
You really, you know, you have to make sure that you're setting this up and utilizing it in such a way that doesn't feel like it's aggressive or manipulative or anything like that, but it's really growing and better understanding our shared interests.
Almost complementary to their experience in a way, right? You're trying to deepen that experience.
Absolutely, and I feel like you know, because we're very high touch, and so the moment I feel like we try and go more systematic with it, especially at the higher level, you know, we spoil something, and so it's adding texture to our connection is what that does. So and you can think of it it's going to be a very subtle thing. I think it's the director or our director of development knowing when a high-level donor or a high-level member or just an artist or a person of interest walks in to the building, and maybe that's a good time to get up from their desk and just give a little, you know, wave to in the building, and you know, not to overly engage or actively work a donor, but to really just, like I said, add that texture and depth.
Well,
and
it's
give
what we
them the
talked
opportunity
about,
to
right.
engage.
Because we've talked about that, how technology can kind of create a more intimate experience for members. Because you do have members that, if they're members, they love the National, right? And I can see why, right?
Yeah.
It is a beautiful facility. It is fun to be there. And that technology is going to enable a more enriched experience.
Yeah. And so you could think of like, you know, we'll buy a gift for a donor or for a member or something. Like they'll have a birthday or they'll have a significant event. And it's customizing that based off of the knowledge you have. And so that's kind of like the second thing, is adding that texture. And then the third thing is institutionalizing that knowledge rather than individualizing it. And so that as we go through generations of staff and leadership, that knowledge is within the institution and not within just an individual.
Well, as a strategist, what I love hearing is like, you're really harnessing data.
Yeah.
Right. And then that's the ability of using technology now in this space, is that you can harness that data to make smarter decisions and really increase your customer or member experience.
I do think that we have to, and then exercising the judgment on how to utilize
right,
that.
not going overly. So you're right, because in the beginning we thought it was going to be like, we did talk about that.
Oh, this is so amazing. You can, you hook into their social accounts and you can get these things, and it really truly is amazing and a little bit scary. And now we got all these robots working. We got Fabio working.
Fabio's
the
doing
whole
great stuff in the
database.
background. Yeah.
you know, and it's really interesting. But I do think, you know, people and donors, and they're instantly aware of that. And so it can decrease your authenticity. And so you really have to, you know, exercise that judgment of you getting the knowledge, understanding it, but then using it in a way that is kind, that is, you know, true to your mission and your brand. And that, you know, we're, you know, obviously a small museum, but that I think that goes across organizations.
I think it does too.
And it might work differently for a large organization that's got thousands of constituents,
right?
You know, or tens of thousands of
well,
constituents.
And what I've always admired about what you and your team did there is you always took a moment to pause and say, what does the member really want?
Right.
Not so much what can I provide them,
right?
But what are they really asking for? Yeah. And those are two very different questions, right? Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, to that point, let's kind of transition to a broader topic in that, you know, in the future proofing space. You know, over the past few years, we've obviously worked very, very closely together and all around the future state technology strategy. So how critical do you think that first step is to capturing the gains you're realizing now? And let's start with Thomas.
Well, you know, for first, it was a really huge investment. So I had to go to the board and actually make the commitment, get their commitment of funds. And, you know, it wasn't a hard sell at first. You know, it was a $500,000 ask over 3 years. And the case really was around, if I needed to hire an employee, this is what the long-term commitment would be. But this investment in technology, which up front, you know, to an organization that has a $38 million budget, it's budget dust. But for a nonprofit, I understand that that's a huge ask. But really what I had to show was what was going to be an initial upfront huge investment would pay off dividends.
That ROI has to be realized.
And that ROI I was able to calculate. And what I'm fortunate to say is that we actually spent much less than the $500,000. And it came in at around 330. And that was over a 3-year period. And right now, I think that, you know, the ongoing sustaining costs are under $75,000.
That's fantastic.
Which is less than an employee per year.
And that's the goal here is to kind of take that tactical work off the table so you can be more strategic and do more for the community to the mission.
Right. And what I think really is the return on investment is the morale and the energy, and we are much more flexible with our employees. They can remotely work. This can all be done on a remote way. And that has changed with COVID. Our team is much more happier. And this is great work.
Right. It's the new world. We have to adapt to that. Yeah. And John, how about you? From a technology strategy perspective, how critical was that step for you?
The future proofing?
Yeah, from a future proofing perspective, laying out that vision.
You know, I think we were so focused on fixing our internal issues that it was getting that base platform. Right. You know, we were at a point where you know, we were really struggling with just basic operations, and like our, you know, we were doing spreadsheets across departments. You know, people. I remember. You know, our purchase order process was completely manual and cumbersome. And you just, everybody spent more time shuffling work than they did working. And so, you know, we were really focused on that. And so as far as like future proofing is concerned, we were looking for, okay, we have to build to today, you know, and then we can grow into the future.
Well, it's kind of what our keynote said, right? Stop loving the problem.
Yeah.
And you had to get out of that cycle.
And that's a great point, because we have found we very much love the problem. And we still do.
It's hard not to. I think it was a really good observation. Yeah, it's really hard not to love.
Yeah, and you know, even to this day, part of this, you know, as we transition through this, is reminding people the reason we're doing this is all of this was broken. You know, as we struggle with this, you know, all the degree of change that we're managing right now, and everybody's, you know, been doing this for months and tired. You know, it's reminding. You know, the reason we're doing this is because we needed to break this, right? And you know, it's working. And
it's going to be painful at first, but you're going to find a better place.
We're going to find a better place.
Right.
It's reminding people.
That's hard. Well, you're setting up for great. So let's switch into the second topic of our discussion: embracing change. Right. So you're setting me up really well here, John. You didn't mean to, but you did a great job. Thank you. So let's explain. Can you both explain how you've embraced such a forward approach here? How critical was a strong change management strategy to getting through that process? Let's stick with John here, and then we'll go to Thomas.
We started with knowing that we were probably biting off more than we could chew.
Right.
Which it gets back to that kind of strategically understaffed philosophy.
I really like how you word that.
our reach was a little bit beyond our grasp,
Yeah.
but we reach anyway, and eventually we'll get there. And so the change management aspect of it, we knew as we were going through this that it was going to get on people's nerves, that people were going to embrace it at varying levels.
Which is always the case
Always
everywhere.
the case.
Yeah.
And then at different times, they were going to embrace it in different ways.
And we're human. Like, we don't really like change. We say we do. We don't really.
And especially, we're doing this, kind of through a COVID environment, and everything is turning upside down just constantly.
I mean, we went from in-person workshops with you to having to do it virtually. And
and almost an instant. And, and so as you're, bringing this change throughout the organization, keeping morale on it and keeping focus on it is very difficult. And it's really just been a matter of being consistent, being positive, reminding people of why we're doing this, what the end result is we're looking for, and allowing and understanding their frustration, and letting them work through that.
There is a therapeutic element to this, I agree.
Absolutely.
Right, yeah. You have to be able to, you have to mind the venting. That has to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been one of them as well. I've been parts of this poor Armanino team.
Talbot and Judy play great therapists. They did a great job.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure I like their billable hours as part of my therapy.
Yeah, well.
But just managing that and understanding that everybody's got their own pace that they're going to be able to do this at, and letting that happen and trusting that you're going to get there.
Well, that's a good point, because it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It can't be, because we're talking about everybody has different roles, different expectations, and different experiences with the technology. You have to be very mindful.
And you can watch some people are going to embrace it, super early and be super proactive about it. And then what you found is we'll show those results to some of the people that are less engaged and less kind of apt to embrace that, and say, look, what we're able to do with a little bit of work and a little bit of cleverness, we were able to do these results, and we can do that over here too. And so then they can start to see, and that's just different people's style.
Right. Right. No, that makes sense. So thank you, John. So Thomas, how would you answer that then, from a change management strategy perspective? How critical was that, and how did you approach it?
Well, the way I managed change and significant changes, it's all incremental, and you have to be very strategic with it. So in 2018, we participated in what would be a national study. It's a grantee perception report that we participate. Basically, foundations participate in allowing their grantees to give them some feedback. And in this feedback, we have the opportunity to ask a question. We asked a strategic question. If you were to receive payment, would you prefer a check or would you prefer an electronic payment? And we didn't define what electronic payment was.
Sure.
And of course, people all responded, 97% of them, they would want an electronic payment.
That doesn't surprise me.
And it doesn't surprise me, because most people would think electronic payment means faster. I knew that was what the answer would be. But I knew that I didn't have the software capability. I didn't have the accounting software. And so I was setting the stage for, if that's what our grantees want, then we have to change.
We have to enable that somehow.
Yeah. Right. So I was able to say with these results to the board, I need 2 years to get ready.
You need a Fabio.
I need a Fabio. I need a new software system. So just let me do some strategic planning. So that set the stage for management and me to begin to set the board for the expectation of budget ask. My team, the grants team, all of that caught the stage of, we're going to go through a huge transition. So that was setting stage. Then I had to work with my team of how are we going to change our internal processes, and we engaged you. And we went through a whole team process where we looked at our systems, we saw where there were strengths, where there were weaknesses, what bringing an RPA process might look like, how that was going to quell any fears. No one's losing their job.
Right, you have to demystify it. I mean, that's part of this. You have to take that fear out of the room. I totally agree.
Totally have to take that room out. And then also let them see what their real functions might look like. And so that whole process went along while we were looking at software. And everyone on the team had input in the new softwares that we were looking at. So it wasn't my decision, it was their collective decision. And once we got to that point, there was total buy-in. Like, the board didn't care what software we picked.
No.
they wanted to know that we picked the right one, and the right one was taking the team through that process. And so, I think managing and embracing change is really bringing people along with you, and it was really more of a facilitated process. It wasn't.
I agree. Often I'll say, and you guys have heard this before from me, is that we start that change process on day one.
Yeah.
By inclusion.
Yeah.
Because by the time you get to day 100, whenever the end is, right, like they're already there.
Yeah. I also think in managing change, you need to be prepared for those hiccups. And what I think we found is that the process was very smooth as we got into.
You mean to tell me no project's a straight line to the end, Thomas? What are you telling me something new today? What's going on?
I think I maybe had 5 seconds of a doubt, and that doubt led to other people having doubt, which lasted about maybe 2 weeks.
Right.
The canary in the coal mine, moment. And you manage that. And I think with the way I've found you manage that is you listen, you hear, and you give people lots of space. And I like to call it the sandbox.
Oh, okay.
And the sandbox is really where people get to, throw sand, where people get to play with the sand, and where people...
Which generally is not very painful.
Generally not.
Hopefully not
unless it's got wet.
Right. I guess there's ways to make it painful, sure.
But this was all during COVID, and so I thought was very fascinating is that we weren't physically present, and most of this was all happening in a virtual space. We did have a few moments where we were able to come together, and we had one meeting where the team really was vocal. And, I thought it was a moment of mutiny on the Bounty. And, what do you do in that moment? And that was my 5 seconds of fear, like, this is all going to come crumbling about.
Right.
And, you just have that face-to-face interaction, and you let people vent. And if they feel heard and they feel like they can say their piece, and I was told, slow down. I tend to be the man in the carriage who's whipping the horse. It's just like, wait a minute, can you just hear us and pause for a second? And I did. In that moment, they felt heard. And 2 weeks later, they were singing the praises.
Right, and often that's all you need is to release that pressure, hear what's being said.
Exactly.
You can get past that moment and then start to focus on what's next.
Yeah, and they were singing praises, and the board and the chair of our president was just like, this is amazing, they love it.
That's great. Yeah. So let's go a level deeper. So what would be the most critical aspect of that? So you've both gone through implementing new technologies, right? So what's that most critical change management aspect? Pick one for me. What was the most critical you saw? We'll start with John. We'll give Thomas a minute.
What was the most critical change management?
Yeah, like what's the most critical aspect of change that you feel like, hey, if we get this one piece right, the rest is going to flow?
Like I keep my kind of mantra through this is like, if on day one we can open for business, then I think we're successful. And keeping that focus on it. So that to me makes us focus on practical issues,
right,
rather than we can solve the 95% of problems pretty easily and get to that point, and then we'll get to that 5% that's causing the problem. Because I think what happens with these projects, and what I've seen happen with these projects, is it's really easy to get lost in those exception transactions.
It really is, and that they're just on the side though. Right. It's not the meat of the issue.
And you can really stall out a project by chasing down these exceptions, when really what you need to be focusing on is that 95%. And the second, we could show that 95% of this was happening accurately, was happening smoothly, people started getting more excited. Whereas they were frustrated chasing down, difficult transactions or difficult interactions that, and then coming back frustrated, they were looking at this and saying, oh, wait a minute, so much more is going to be better.
Right.
And, just showing them like, we're transitioning our CRM, and there's tremendous concerns. We have 20 years of data in that. And our first glance at the database, and it was a mess.
It's overwhelming too.
Yeah, it's a
lot to look at.
Or 61,000, constituent records with relationships between them that have decades of giving history, all this kind of stuff. And from a finance perspective, very concerned about, but not super on my radar all the time. From the debits and credit standpoint.
Right.
But it's super important to the organization. It's a tremendous asset. So making sure that comes over accurately. And the first time we looked at it, of course it was a mess, but we were able to identify some patterns in the mess, and within like 3 days, and that was my kind of mutiny moment of like,
we all have those moments. I think those are real moments.
Right.
Yeah.
And I sat down with him. I was like, okay, yeah, this is rough, and this is a tough spot. But we identified these patterns. We had, I set up a series of daily meetings with the entire team. And, within 10 days, it was worked out. And we had a database that we felt confident in. And suddenly the people that were, ready to have me walk the plank, 10 days earlier,
right. Now they're seeing some of the proof. They're like, oh, wait a second, this is going to work.
This is
actually better.
Yeah.
Well, in some cases, those quick wins is really what changes the trajectory of success.
Yeah.
Right. The faster you can generate some positive momentum, the quicker you can get some people on board. Right. That's fantastic. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so let's transition to our third. Oh, I'm sorry, Thomas. I forgot. I'm getting too excited over here.
The change management, probably critical factor, and this is a plug,
yes.
And I confess that now, is your managed services component of Armanino services.
Wow, okay, thank you.
This is a plug for Michelle Schimberg, who was actually assigned to us.
She's pretty fantastic,
She's fantastic.
I agree.
We contracted for 2 hours per week in the first year, and then tried that down in the second year, and we're still going to contract out in the third year that my accounting team actually had the one-on-one. And that really took from not only that initial implementation training, but it brought it into the practical. And there is an element of translational piece that needs to happen. I think we're all unique in our own ways, but I think being able to take it from what I would consider kind of the design element to the day-to-day practice, and having the comfort of being able to have someone who do that translational piece of how does this really work in the day-to-day environment, but also someone who can say, that's the way they taught you, but here's a more practical way to do it. And a coach, if you will. And I think we all need mentors and coaches throughout life, and this was like a mentoring process. And if my team would say, keep that going for maybe another third year, and then maybe we just need a spot check every once in a while. But that was the critical factor that made this change movement.
That's great to hear, because you're right. This is not a go-it-alone strategy often. You do need people to help support you there, not Armanino and others as well, but even internally too. And getting that support is critical to seeing this kind of realized, right?
And then fantastic. They become the internal champions.
Right. They start to own it and realize that this is powerful. And then often when I see, I don't know if you guys would agree, but then other ideas start to emerge. Yes. It's not just about this one moment in time. And now the excitement builds to what do we do next? Yes. Right. And I think that, to me, that's the most exciting part of these kinds of things, right? Because to your point, you finally build a foundation. Now what do you do with it?
Yeah. Before I walked in this room, I didn't know that we could do a Fabio.
We can, John. We can do a Fabio. Will it be Fabio Jr., Fabio 2? We'll have to, I guess you'll have to figure it out.
I don't know.
Yeah, you don't know yet. We'll have to take a poll.
The team will.
But everybody names it. Every client we've had, it names the bot. It's just a fun thing.
And they actually name it before you actually get it.
There you go. It's fantastic. All right. So now let's actually transition to the third topic, navigating disruption. And you teed us up well, Thomas, for it. So you guys have been through a lot of changes we've talked through over the past couple of years. And you've both been visionaries in your respective practices for doing that. So what would be some of your biggest learnings and advice you could give or impart to this audience over how to navigate that disruption successfully? You've kind of touched on some of them already, but how would you maybe kind of bring that up to the surface for us? Start with John. We'll go with John.
Like Tom, I'm, like a change agent and driving and very ambitious. I would say probably don't bite off more than you can chew. Right. Probably be more realistic about your capacity to do this. The entire time everybody does something like this, they're also doing their job.
Right.
And so you're basically adding 1, if not 1.5 jobs to everybody's life. And then, through the transition, you're literally doubling their workload, as you do dual entry and you do, into CRM and to financial systems. And you're really asking a lot of the team. And we transitioned our financial system a few months before we transitioned our CRM system. And, a few hiccups in the financial system, pushed that into the CRM world, into the CRM timeline.
Right.
And then everything's doubled up. And, it's probably more work than we should be doing.
It creates stress. It does.
It creates stress on the organization, on the individuals. And it compromises the project.
Well, and it can also stifle adoption of it too if that stress becomes too great.
Right.
I agree. Yeah.
And so I think probably the best thing I would say is, have realistic expectations going into it of what you're really capable of getting, your organization is really capable of.
And being patient too, because it doesn't have to happen overnight. This can be, we're talking about a several-year period of time here for both of you.
Yeah.
It's going to take that to get it right.
So I think that's just setting those real expectations.
That's great. That's great. Thomas, what would you add on that? Yeah, what's your thoughts?
I completely agree. You have to have talent. And so having talent in place, then it's clearly the technology. The thing I might add is you need a management champion. And I think for me, it was having a president and CEO who was very permissive, who was like, don't be bleeding edge, but you can be leading edge. And a board who was committed to supporting that, go as far as you can go and be lean and mean.
It's like a yes and approach, right?
Yes,
that's
and.
fantastic.
I think the other piece is to consistently be creative and be flexible, but also patient, and realize that there will be moments where you need to let go of the reins and let them kind of slow down and canter. And then you can whip the horse when you need to get it going a little more. And I don't believe in whipping horses, just so you all know. I love horses. I'm a PETA person.
I've not noticed any courses at the foundation, so yeah.
There are no horses at the
Not seen
foundation.
any, yeah.
The last piece I really do is celebrating wins, even small wins. So I mentioned the sandbox. There was no sand thrown. But we do a lot of small celebrations, and Fabio is always part of those celebrations.
That's great.
He has a whole summer line and outfits. But I think we do that as a way of
If we had known, we would have had screenshots up
Yes, I
front.
should have
I wish I'd known that. We would have put screenshots up. That would have been great.
On a horse.
On a horse, of course. Yeah. That seems very Fabio-esque, though. Yeah, I think we're in theme.
Sure, it's not.
So I think that would be the three things or four things I would add to that.
I think that's fantastic. You both have just done a splendid job of navigating that disruption, so I want to commend you on that because it is hard. It is daunting. So I'm going to switch and I'm going to make you both do a little prognosticating now. You're going to have to forecast for me. This is about futurism today, right? So what are those next waves of disruption you see coming, and how do you think you're going to prepare for it now? So we're going to predict. We'll come back in a year. We'll figure out if it was right or not. But John, start us off. What do you think those next disruptions are?
I do think the next disruptions are like workforce related. I think, it's managing not managing, but adapting to and understanding the demands of the workforce and our employees and our staff, and meeting those. Everybody is, super sophisticated. Everybody is used to, it's mobile first, and they are used to things being intuitive and easy to follow through on, or easy to act on in a moment. It's not setting up boundaries or barriers for them to take action or follow through on things. It's making it possible for them to take action in the moment and meeting that expectation of the employees. I think that's the thing that hopefully this technology is going to enable, probably even more powerful than our donor. Because
I think it's going to unlock a lot of potential for it, right? I think it will. I think that's the beautiful part of these technologies, the Fabios of the world. Right? It unlocks a lot of potential.
When you think of curators, when you think of educators, spending time shuffling paperwork instead of with, artists or with teachers and students, that's so much more powerful than, whatever gizmo we're using.
Well, and that speaks to the mission. The whole point is to be focused on the mission. How can this enable you to do that?
Right. Yeah. And so I think, taking a moment to have a bit of an employee focus as much as we have an external focus, which is hard to do in an organization because,
it often gets forgotten sometimes.
Right. Because, everybody's driving revenue. Yeah. Everybody's trying to.
Yeah. We got our blinders on. We're doing our day to day. It's really hard to sometimes zoom out and stop for a minute.
Yeah. And say, wait a minute, if we just make this better, we can be much more powerful.
Exactly.
So I think that's what we'll see.
Great. Okay, we're written it down. This is being taped, right?
Yeah,
we're live.
1 year from
1 year from now. Let's see if that's true.
I have absolute confidence.
Yeah, I have a really high degree, maybe, of confidence. Okay, that's fantastic. Thomas, what would you add to that?
I agree with you. I think talent will drive where the disruptions will be. I think we will not necessarily see ourselves in buildings where people are confined to workspaces. So I think mobility is going to be key. I think people are going to be not stuck to a particular device. So we need to become agnostic to devices. I think we also will find that people want multi-platforms. So our ability to communicate across device, platform, software is going to be required. So the bot really has to be able to communicate.
I see that future as well. I think these bots are becoming more and more critical to enabling you to do all those other things. I don't know how you're going to do it without it.
I agree.
The speed of change is so fast. Right? We heard about that earlier. I don't know how you do it without it.
Yeah, so I think that will be the future. And then I think the last piece is if you are not adaptable and not flexible, you are not going to make it in this world.
That's a really key point.
And so, I think of young people and even older people who want to stay in the workforce. If you're not willing to stay at the rate of change, you need to think about something new or stepping out of leadership.
Let's double click on that for a second. So how would you advise someone to be more to embrace that flexibility?
Well, we're in sort of this tough economic time, and I think people who are at the top of leadership, are thinking, what does the future look for me if I retire now? And it's not a great time to be drawing down on my pension or whatever that may be. And I understand those realities, but at the same time, if you don't know how to turn on your computer or if you don't know how to adapt into new technologies, are you the right person for leading a change moment with lots of technology? And I think there's ways of stepping out and letting people who can do that lead, and maybe you're an advisor or something like that. So I think people need to be able to move about and recognize what their strengths are.
Exactly.
And then also at the same time, young people, I think, need to be tapped and said, you have that adaptability, and let's tap you to do something.
Right. Step up and lead. That's fantastic. Okay.
And I can get out of the way.
Yeah. Fabio stays. Thomas will get out of the way. Okay. Well, this is fantastic. Thank you both for joining me up here today. I know we're going to segment into Q&A here briefly, but I believe we have another polling question before we do that. So I'll hand it off to Megan.
Yep, we've got our last two polling questions for this session before we move into some Q&A and address a few of the questions that were submitted. So if you are tuning in virtually and hoping to get that CPE, make sure you tune in here and get those polling question answers in. This one is true or false. I believe having a future-focused technology strategy will be critical to my organization's continued success. Going to give you guys plenty of time to get those answers in. So I believe having a future-focused technology strategy will be critical to my organization's continued success. True or false? Give everyone a few moments. Want to give you plenty of time to get those answers in. Just another moment or two, and let's go ahead and close that one out. Yes, that's awesome. 95% said true. Very important to your organization's continued success. So that's great. Let's move on to our last and final polling question for this session before our Q&A. True or false? We should be talking more regularly about disruption with our management teams and board members in the future. True or false? We should be talking more regularly about disruption with our management teams and board members in the future. Let's get those answers in. Take just another moment or two. Let us know, do you think that you should be talking more regularly about disruption with your management teams and board members? All right, one or two more moments. Great. And yes, 95% or 97% said true, so that's great. I am going to kick it back over. I think Jeff is going to come with some of our submitted Q&A to talk through with these gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. And wow, that was a great session. You guys are a bunch of pros up here. It was really great. Thank you, John and Thomas, for walking us through how you manage that disruption, right? You manage through that change in your organization. And Thomas, a lot of ladies in my life say that they call me Fabio as well. So why is everybody laughing? No, it sounds like I need to stop loving that too. So I guess I'm loving the problem too much. Anyway, so there's some great questions that did come in that I did want to quickly roll through these before we jump into our next session. So Thomas, I think this one's for you. One of our clients down in Austin said, they've tried to put in RPAs and bots, embrace their own Fabio as well, and they got it in place and it was working well for a couple months. And then they had to jump in and constantly tweak it. And so, what are you seeing from that perspective? Is there a lot of management that has to be done to keep it working efficiently?
Well, certainly everything needs maintenance. And we're still early that we haven't had to do a whole lot of maintenance, but as we add new investments, Fabio has to learn. So that is where we do input.
Sure. Great. And then John, there was one for you about which CRM system you ended up choosing.
We went with Salesforce.
Gotcha.
And we're moving from Blackbaud's All True, and it's such a world of difference. Blackbaud All True, it's a strong product, but it's a relatively closed environment. To Salesforce, which is it's whatever you want it to be, seemingly, or whatever I can get Armanino to make.
Yeah, that flexibility is key
Right.
for what you're trying to grow and perform it. Yeah.
Okay, well, that wraps up our time with you guys today. Thank you so much for being here. I'm actually going to invite one of my other partners up onto the stage, Thomas Schulte, as well right now. So thank you guys. You are free to go. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Pleasure. Great. Thank you, John. Yeah. Thomas.
Okay, well, we are back, and I promise we're going to jump into a break here in a second. But before we do that, I've got a couple of my partners here, and I think there's a conversation we're going to have that I know you guys are going to be interested in hearing.
You get to sit on this side now.
You do?
Yeah, that's
you feel
different.
like,
It's a whole
hey,
different
the
perspective.
student becomes a teacher,
I
right?
know,
So,
yeah.
anyway, well, in this volatile and uncertain world where there's so much change happening, I've got a couple of my partners that I really wanted to walk through kind of what the strategic planning process looks like. So with me, you've already met John Stewart, who navigated that last session beautifully. And I've got Tom Schulte here. Tom's our national nonprofit growth partner. He's based out of the Southern California area. So I'm going to jump in and just start chatting with you, Tom, since you're new to the conversation. I know you've been involved with nonprofit organizations your entire career. You professionally and personally have been involved in serving the nonprofit community in California. And so you've been the chair, the treasurer, the audit committee chair of a dozen nonprofits over the years, right?
That's like a lot, Tom.
It is. It has actually. I did a list the other day, and over the last 100 years, I think I've been on about 24 boards, nonprofit, public company, private company, and Armanino's board as well.
Right.
So, but from the nonprofit side, they've ranged in all sorts of sizes, complexities, prominence. But you go from Mothers Against Drunk Driving to Easter Seals to Girl Scouts, the Grammy Museum. They all have the same level of importance.
So within that professional and personal experience that you have serving nonprofits, what's a common issue that you see a lot across all nonprofit organizations?
You're right. Yeah, all organizations have their distinct issues, but now just all organizations have one. And they're all emerging from the last 2.5 years. And it's a different world. As you've heard many times today already, it's a post-COVID world, and people are just starting to understand this. There's changes in the population that all these organizations serve, in what they require. There's new means of funding. There's changes in the funding that they used to depend on. And that's just a start. Employees.
Right.
How do you find them? How do you retain them? How do you properly compensate them? Succession planning. Just throw that out the window. That's completely changed. And so I don't think there's an organization around that hasn't seen that this period is one of the most challenging that they've ever faced.
So how are these organizations approaching these challenges that are facing them?
Well, most organizations need to just take their old strategic plan and burn it. It's just can't be relevant in this period anymore. And if you don't have a strategic plan, it's not an option anymore. It's mandatory. You have to have a strategic plan to go forward.
So tell me, what is a strategic plan typically comprised of?
Well, I think I can help you answer that
go
one.
for it,
So,
John.
typically a strategic plan, right? To make a strong one, you're going to go from vision to goals to approach to action. And that's going to be coming with defining a number set of criteria, right? Strategic objectives, KPIs, leading and lagging indicators, just to name a few. And then you got to layer over your frameworks and your roadmaps, because the ultimate goal of a strategic plan is to cascade it through the organization, right?
Sure.
And then that you can get to execution and then tracking it. Now, it's not meant to be simple or short, but it can certainly be less painful and more efficient in nature. And basically the last point I would say on that is everything needs to be catered to the actual organization and its culture. It's not a canned approach.
Yeah, a one size fits one approach. Right?
Exactly, yeah, it has to be.
So there's a lot to unpack in what you just said, but let me just drill into this burning question in my mind. Who's responsible for putting the strategic plan into action?
Well, my experience has been that the bulk of it's carried out by upper management at all levels. But to start it out, the initial direction and the ultimate approval, it comes from the board. But that how you get started, that's a good question. That's something that Stewie and his group can probably answer. So,
Well, the process is tough, yeah, and thank you, Tom, for that. The process can be tough, it can be daunting. Usually it can be its own obstacle, Jeff, right?
Sure.
And so we can help there, right? And we can help in the beginning, just helping build that inertia, get over that initial obstacle. We can help counsel through the entire process, or even at the end, helping drive the execution. It's really whatever fits best to the organization at the time. But this is what we do. This is what we've done for numerous companies or organizations throughout the nation.
well, one of the thoughts that we were talking, and we said, this would be a really good retreat topic for organizations out there, because I've never been in a situation where planning for a retreat and trying to find topics that's really important to both management and to the board, there's never one that's more important than setting out and on the right strategic planning course. And this checks all the boxes for me from all the retreats, because it's always a tough time to find a proper person to present that retreat topic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, as we stand here today, it's a really timely, conversation, right? Because as school's going back in right now, or has been back in for a month or so, and we got, calendar year ends approaching quickly, I would imagine that this is something organizations, really should be focusing on right now. And this is the retreat season that we're going into. So let me just summarize this real quickly, because I think we've kind of hit things pretty broadly, but I want to make sure I understand this. So John, you or somebody on your team
Right.
Can come out to an organization's retreat, board meeting, whatever it really needs to be, and help them start the strategic planning process.
That's absolutely correct, Jeff. So we can show up at the retreat, the board meeting, wherever they actually need us, that's where we'll be. This is the kind of work we love doing. We get tremendous joy out of it, because in the nonprofit sector, like the mission, the work that you guys are doing is so impactful, right?
Yeah.
So we get tremendous joy from helping. So we're here to help. We're here to help on that journey.
And you could start the process, or you can be the guide along the process way.
Yeah. There's a lot of flexibility to how we can help.
Do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is what we love doing. I mean, we love bringing innovative solutions to our clients. We love serving nonprofits, because through our service to nonprofits, we're serving the community, right? And this, putting a strategic plan in place in this world where we got to embrace that change. We got to stop loving the problem, right?
Yep.
This is critical. So
Yeah, this is critical step one.
yeah, well, thank you guys. Well, if this is something that you or your organization feels like you're interested in, we'd love to, have a quick conversation. Please feel to reach out to us at Armanino and let us know if, getting involved in your strategic planning process is something that you're interested in. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you so much for your time. We're going to jump into a break right now. We have a great session coming up next. Mary Trussell is going to talk to us about ESG and what's going on with that in our world these days. So it's going to be a really impactful session. So we're going to come back here at 12:10 here in about 6 or 7 minutes. So we'll see you then.
All right, everybody, we're going to have just about 1 more minute until we rejoin and begin our next session. So grab your snacks, grab your drinks, and head back to your seat or your computer, and we will get started again in about just another minute.
All right, well, welcome back. I'm really excited about this next session. So it's often been said that today's best practices will be tomorrow's requirements. Environmental, social, and governance initiatives are no exception. And I'd like to introduce you to a friend of mine, Mary Tressel, who's Armanino's Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives and ESG Leader for More Global, who's here to talk about ESG principles and how those practices and how they will help answer those questions that your board members and your stakeholders are asking today. So sit back, this is gonna be a great session. Mary, kick it over to you, let's go.
All right, thank you, Jeff, thanks so much. So today, when you walk away from this session, I'm gonna introduce myself, and I really just wanted to point out the first bullet point on my bio there. We had a speaker come to Armanino a couple years ago, and she talked about the motherhood penalty, and that when white males serve on PTA, they get a boost in their salary. When a white female puts PTA on their resume, they actually have a 75% less chance of getting the job. So it's really disappointing to hear that. And I'm saying this, and I put it on there because I want to make a statement. I learned how to do public speaking. I learned how to be able to stand up to difficult audiences. There is no more impassioned constituency than parents of elementary students. So I learned a lot by being a PTA president, and I want all of you out there, if that's your role, take pride in it and use it to your advantage in your work. But as we move forward here, we have a polling question. So I will let Megan take care of the polling question.
Thanks, Mary. We're going to kick this session off with one polling question. Do you know what ESG stands for?
A lot of people do not.
This might be an easy one, it might be tough. Do you know what ESG stands for? We've got a few multiple choice options there: equality, society, and government, environmental, social, and governance, equality, social, and governance. So, do you know what ESG stands for before we jump into Mary's session? Get those answers in for this first polling question. Give everybody plenty of time here. Make sure we get those answers in. Just wait another moment or two. Let us know, what does ESG stand for? One more moment. And I think we are good. All right, environmental, social, and governance. 72% of you got it right. Not bad.
Ooh, fantastic, that's a great score. All right, so moving forward, let's talk about those three components of ESG. And they were first introduced in 2005 when the United Nations put together their Sustainable Development Goals. I really love the fact that the United Nations made these very simple and straightforward and clear. And many of you in our audience are working on these goals with your organization. So they're very straightforward on the idea of no poverty, or addressing life underwater and life on land. All of these goals are meant to really allow all our communities across the globe to continue to grow. It is a sustainable development, so to continue to grow, but do so in a manner that protects our natural resources and the resources that we need as humans. So digging deep into what is ESG. On the environmental side, most people think about ESG and they think about the E, the environmental side, kind of greenhouse gas emissions, water and waste impacts of a company or an organization, supply chain and procurement. So that's the big focus for environmental. And it's a lot to unpack, but it is very important as we see what's happening in Florida today and yesterday. Climate change is with us, and that is why there's such a focus by investors and workers and customers on ESG. They want companies to be addressing these things. On the social side, we like to think about labor standards, diversity, equity, inclusion, and also community impact. Where is a business really impacting the community in which it is sited, and that ripple effect that the business has on that neighborhood, city, nation, or the globe. Governance is something, if we've got our CFOs in the audience, the finance professionals are very comfortable kind of in the governance realm because we've been really clear about great financial reporting and strict financial reporting requirements for years. But governance in the integrated reporting of ESG also goes to, are you addressing your stakeholders and understanding what their needs are and what their goals are for your organization? Are you making sure, again, that you're including diversity as you build your board and your management structure? And then cybersecurity, data security, when it comes to nonprofits, you might think about donor data security. That's a key element of governance when it comes to ESG. So who cares about this? Everybody. Everybody cares about this. Your beneficiaries, whether it's the visitors to the National Museum and the members there, or it's the visitors to your soup kitchen, the Girl Scouts that Tom was talking about, they all care. Your employees very much care. I've got some great statistics for you on that in a moment. Donors want to understand what your stance is and see a transparent report from you on all the factors of ESG. Your volunteers, your funders, your community partners, government agencies, media and social media. There's a great danger in today's world from greenwashing, from companies and organizations saying they are doing more when it comes to ESG than they actually are. And so the media and social media will find that out. And then your vendors and suppliers, they're key constituents as well. So I spoke about employees. Millennials, Gen Z, 2/5 of them have rejected a job if the company doesn't have the same social values that they hold. So they've gone through the interview process and decided they're not meeting my litmus test when it comes to the social issues, the environmental issues that I care about. But on the positive side, those who do feel engaged in their companies or their organization's mission are likely to say 5 or plus more years at the organization. This stands out to me because we had a young member of our team, and he told me he was measuring his career in 6-month increments. He stayed at Armanino for 2.5 years. So I thought, wow, we really did great because we 5x'd his projected length of time at an organization. So millennials are ready to move, and if you can get them to engage in your values and your culture, they will stay with you longer. So we have another polling question, Megan.
All right, our second polling question for the session. Does your organization have an ESG strategy or program in place? Yes, it's an integral part of our strategic plan and operations. No, or we're in the process of determining what ESG factors align with our organization's mission. So give everybody a few moments to get those answers in. Let us know, does your organization have an ESG strategy in place, or is it something that your organization is kind of grappling with right now and kind of figuring out your path forward? Let's get those answers in, all my virtual folks. Just a reminder from home for that CPE credit, make sure you get these polling questions answered. Does your organization have an ESG strategy in place? Yes, no, or we're figuring it out. Let's give everybody another moment or two. Get those answers in, please. One more moment. And I think we're good. And kind of a split. 41% said no ESG strategy in place. 32% said yes, and 27% said kind of in the process of grappling with it and figuring it out.
Thank you, Megan. Actually, I think that's really encouraging because as of today, there are no regulatory requirements for nonprofits to have an ESG strategy and program in place. So that 32% of you are doing it, that's fantastic. For those of you who are figuring it out or do not have one, your board is going to be asking you questions. So as we go through the next few slides, you'll see a question, and then we'll give you some feedback on that. So the first question is around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And it's really important for nonprofits to be able to answer this question of their board about paying a living wage and making sure that we are including employees irrespective of a variety of status areas. So I think a way for a nonprofit to get started, this is a great kind of continuous improvement graphic. I know we're going to be sharing out these slides later on. So great graphic to understand how to address diversity, equity, and inclusion at an organization. It always starts at your purpose. So at nonprofits, we all have strong missions, but we don't want to hide behind that mission and not address key things like diversity, equity, and inclusion. And when you start at your purpose and build out that strategy and start to implement it, key factor is measuring your progress when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then iterating, improving upon that strategy and really approaching it. And you can address all these areas of people, process, your partners, your product, and your position. The product piece may be the service that you are offering as a nonprofit. So really want to encourage you to get started on your DEI journey if you have not. The next piece is following the money. So many board members may say, what is our endowment investment policy in regards to ESG funds? So what can you do here? And we hear from the nonprofit information website that it's really a great way to do more with more money. So you've got an endowment. So and Trista touched on this in her presentation. Make sure that that money is going to have positive effects beyond just building those proceeds for your own programs. And there are a few different ways to do this. So non-market funds, again, Trista spoke about this, and she has it in her book as well, are loans to community-level businesses, especially in marginalized communities. And the return that your endowment would receive is the return on those loans. There's an organization called Seed Commons. It's a national network for these types of non-market funds. So I would look into Seed Commons. Direct indexing. So direct indexing was first put in place so investors could try and get the greatest profits out of the funds that they invested into. So they could invest in a broad spectrum of companies, and then they could go through and select ones that they'd like to exclude. Well, now we're seeing very conscious investors excluding funds out of their portfolio that don't meet their values. And so they're using direct indexing to make sure that the money they're spending and investing is going to companies that have strong ESG records. And then there are the activist investors. And I think the most famous example in current times right now is ExxonMobil and the Engine One investors that made quite an impact and caused Exxon to create they add 3 new board members and focus on reducing the carbon footprint of Exxon. So this activist investors really kind of exert pressure on these companies that they want to see change their ways. So for ESG investing also, are we attracting and retaining eco-conscious donors and government grants that when we are reducing and reporting our environmental footprint? So when you look at these pictures, I love to say that these are our next generation of Armanino leaders, but they are also the next generation of philanthropists. They are those who will either inherit wealth from parents or grandparents, or as they are growing in their careers, will become those high net worth individuals. And many of them are focused on spending down their assets during their lifetime. They want to make sure that they're getting money out into the community and creating a bit more of a wealth balance. And also some researchers argue that donating is more impactful than impact investors. So we've got a new generation that is looking at ways to invest in your organization and others. Also, when it comes to ESG, you really want to think about how are you maximizing corporate and civic sponsorships and using your power as a nonprofit to really share that impact with the community. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples here of where partnerships have been very powerful for nonprofits. So we're seeing them come together and make a difference. So the first one is Unilever and the UK government and the UN Refugee Agency and the International Rescue Committee. So what do all of these groups have in common? So it might not be apparent, but Unilever set a goal of helping 1 billion people to improve their health and well-being through hand washing programs. And so all these organizations came together and taught proper hand washing, and they have already actually touched 1 billion people about 3 years in advance of their timeline because they work together so well. When it comes to Ecolab and the Nature Conservancy, Ecolab's business model utilizes a lot of water. So what they are committed to is protecting watersheds and regenerating 100% of the water that they use by 2050. So they're really tied in with the Nature Conservancy to make that goal happen. And then we don't often think of Coca-Cola when it comes to ESG, but they have invested with this nonprofit pact, and they've provided millions to help boost female economic development in Southeast Asia. So that's another kind of great story where a nonprofit and a corporate have come together to make a big impact. So if you do not yet have a corporate or a local government partnership, I think you should look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals and go for number 17 and really look for those opportunities where you can partner and maximize your impact. So I leave you as that takeaway from this presentation. And again, thinking about future good, how can you maximize your work by partnering with others? We've got another polling question.
All right, our third polling question for this session. I believe developing and implementing an ESG strategy for my organization will enable us to better recruit and retain talent. True or false? I believe developing and implementing an ESG strategy for my organization will enable us to better recruit and retain talent in the future. True or false? I think this is a great question and look forward to seeing everyone's answers. So let's get those answers in. Give everybody a couple more moments. Let us know, do you believe that developing and implementing ESG with your organization is going to enable you to better recruit and retain talent? True or false? I'll give you another moment or two. And I think we can probably close that one. Yeah, 89% agreed and said true. I do believe that developing and implementing ESG for my organization will enable us to better recruit and retain talent. And I know that Mary can speak even further to that.
Exactly. I think really we see it at Armanino, and we definitely have seen it at our nonprofit clients. It has been a difficult time the last couple of years to be able to hire good talent. And this generation cares very deeply about ESG. So when you're able to address their concerns and answer their questions, it really speaks to what they're looking for in a new job. In fact, we had 140 summer interns at Armanino this year. And doing a presentation, I asked them to raise their hands. Who knew what ESG was? Every hand went up. And we are a certified B Corporation at Armanino, which means we've had a third party evaluate our operations and determine that we do have a strong ESG program and strategy. And again, I asked the question, who knows what a B Corp? Every hand went up. So it does matter to this next generation. And as you're thinking about the future value of ESG for your organization, I think it's really positive. You can attract donors, you can attract corporate sponsors, you can attract your next generation of talent, but you can also do some value for yourself. So future-focused leaders, I go back to Trista's her executive summary in her book, Future Good. I was able to read that and was really impressed. But she talks about focusing your limited attention on issues and strategies where you can have the largest impact. And that is true, very true, when you're putting together an ESG strategy. What we do with our clients is we help them to evaluate what are the key ESG factors, material factors for their stakeholders, and what are the key factors for an organization to grow. And where's that intersection between what stakeholders care about and how your organization can grow and have that positive impact, that's the focus area that you put on when you're developing your ESG strategy. So that's number one. And then you can help others, see a clear path forward on issues. And really, ESG is about long-term value. The companies that are scoring well and getting ESG investment, it's because they're looking at long-term growth and positive impact for their organization. They're not looking for that next quarterly earning. They can actually achieve both. They're doing well on the short term, but they've really got a long-term strategy, and that can be really impactful for nonprofits as well. And then you yourself can be more valuable for your organization and more marketable. And I make this point because I started my career in nonprofits. I helped Armanino create a foundation, and I know that people who work in nonprofits spread themselves very thin, right? We give everything to the organization and the mission that we are trying to achieve. And it is important for you to kind of take care of yourself and your career. So I think one of the things, I'm skipping a slide here, but we'll do this one first. So one of the things about the pandemic is how interconnected all the issues are, right? So ESG really helps companies and organizations to break down the silos. And in the nonprofit community, we often see that we separate issues like social justice, climate change, and public health. But those are all interconnected. And so we can look to our fellow nonprofit colleagues and say, how can we move together further, faster, when we collaborate? So I think it's really important. That's how you bring the value to your organization, is doing those things together and being successful together. And then we have seen this work really well in one industry, and that's higher education, one nonprofit niche, I should say. The Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education has created the STARS program, and it was driven by students and professors. It was not driven by the administration at organizations, but the students and the professors kind of demanded this transparency. And we've seen over 1,000 colleges and universities in the United States take part in the STARS evaluation, and they evaluate different impact areas like we're talking about, curriculum, accessibility and affordability, the air and climate on college campus, and they give different ratings: platinum, gold, silver, bronze. So we're seeing this really great way for comparable data among this nonprofit niche. So I encourage you, if you are in the higher ed field and are interested, to look into this, make sure that your campus is part of this, because again, your future customers, your students, and the next generation of college students is looking at this as they evaluate their choices. But let's get back to the personal impact of ESG and why it's important for you to build out these skills. So what is really apparent in the ESG industry today is there are not enough professionals with the experience. You'll see that the big four, the big consulting firms, they are all hiring and educating and training up their staff to understand ESG, because they understand this is the next big wave for business to respond to. So ESG experience actually provides you with the ability to have more adaptive and critical thinking, that future focus that Trista spoke to us about. It gets you to think about multidisciplinary systems perspective. I think it was Thomas who was saying he was a program manager and became an interim CFO. That's a huge leap in skills, but if you're focusing on ESG, you can learn about the different aspects of your organization. And then it also, if you've got a passion for this, you can really see it play out. So one of the examples in Trista's book was about the Minnesota Council on Foundations. And they did an introspection, and they realized that their purchasing policies were not addressing working with people of color and local businesses. So they were only spending about 6% of their budget each year on local businesses. And so when they took a concerted effort, this is one ESG tactic that they took, but when they took a concerted effort and explained to everyone, this is important, we should focus on this, they set a goal of moving that up to 20% in 1 year. And they went around to the evaluation at the end of that year, and they had increased that spending to 67% of their budget. So I really encourage you to be thinking about the ways that your organization can have an impact beyond your mission, your own single mission, and work to kind of raise all the boats in your area through ESG. And then again, it will also help you raise your own professional qualifications and help you to find your next role, if you'd like. So, and one more polling question.
Thanks, Mary. So this is our final polling question for this session before we move into some really great Q&A with Jeff and Mary. A strong ESG strategy controls a business's ESG narrative, ensures long-term financial health, ensures compliance with ESG regulations, provides goal alignment and accountability, or E, all of the above. Final polling question for this session. So all of my virtual attendees, make sure you're getting that answer in for your CPE credit. Strong ESG strategy controls a business's ESG narrative, ensures long-term financial health, ensures compliance with ESG regulations, provides goal alignment and accountability, or E, all of the above. I do want to make another note. We've heard from some folks in the Q&A. If you've had any issues with polling questions at all, please do not fret. We will take care of you. Reach out to us after. We will make sure that you are all taken care of for your CPE credit. We can see that you have logged in and you are here, so don't fret. Let's get these answers in. Give it another moment or two. Okay, I think we can close it. Great. 87%, all of the above. Seemed like a gimme, but maybe not. All right, I want to kick it over to Jeff and Mary so that they can handle some of our submitted Q&A.
Thank you so much, Megan. And Mary, thank you for a wonderful presentation and discussion. I think I said at the very beginning when I was introducing you that today's best practices are tomorrow's requirements and regulations, right? So these ESG regulations, though, are constantly changing, right? So I guess I'll be devil's advocate here for a second. Should an organization just wait until those regulations are finalized before we start doing anything?
I would think, well, first of all, you're dealing with a passionate audience who really wants to make change in the world. But what we're seeing, we've done a survey, actually a global survey of mid-market businesses. I just want to give this example. That we asked them, have you focused on ESG over the last 3 years? And if you have, what has been your growth? How is your hiring trends going? What about investor interest? And in all categories, businesses that have focused on ESG, even though they are not required to by regulatory bodies as of yet, they all had growth at the rate of 10%, whereas companies who did not focus on ESG, had no focus on it, saw their growth at about 4.7%.
Wow.
So that's a pretty tremendous
real change.
Hiring. They were able to hire at twice the rate as those companies that didn't focus on ESG. And then they saw 84% of them saw a huge investor increase. So what I would say to nonprofits is, this is the way for you to stand out.
Especially in this war for talent that exists
today. The war for talent and for contributions, right? Sure. For your donors, for building that story. Do you want to be the next nonprofit that gets noticed by Mackenzie Scott? By having a holistic and transparent story to share, you are positioning yourself much more strongly.
Yeah, that's great. So do all nonprofits have the same material ESG issues?
Actually, no, that's
Okay.
not the case. So your material issues really depend on kind of the mission and the organization that you are. For instance, we had a foundation and we had a sculpture center, right? So the sculpture center has a physical presence, right? And they've got to worry about the use of plastics and their supply chain and their workers that they are employing in the center, et cetera. The foundation, it's much more like, it has a smaller, I would say, environmental footprint, but maybe a bigger social imprint. And then I think Thomas did speak about governance and all of the investment reports that they get. So they have to have a strong governance of where they are investing their money.
So I've heard you talk a lot, Mary, about an ESG assessment.
Mm-hmm.
So how long does an assessment take? And maybe walk us through a little bit about what that process looks like.
Yeah, and I want to offer to all of you on our Armanino website, if you type in Armanino ESG, you'll find we've done a full explanation of all kind of aspects of ESG. So if you are a self-learner and a self-starter, you can go to our website and really learn how to do an ESG assessment all on your own.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah, because we do believe as a B corporation and as just we want to be a good member of society. We want to empower people to do this. But I also understand we don't all have the time. So when it comes to an assessment, when you work with our Armanino ESG experts, it can take about 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the complexity of your nonprofit. Are you a small nonprofit with a small amount of employees, or are you kind of a national organization and have a footprint everywhere? But the thing that an assessment does is it really talks to you about where are you today, and gives you the opportunity to do that future good work, to think, where do we want to be tomorrow? And the areas are environmental, social, and governance, things like your purchasing policies, your travel, are you purchasing renewable energy at your sites? Again, what is your DEI policy? What are you doing about pay equity? All these areas, we kind of walk you through that process. We interview you and your stakeholders through a survey. So it's pretty simple investment of time on the nonprofit side. And then we come back to you with a report and guidance and recommendations for the future.
Wow, that's great. So when do you think these regulations might be finalized?
Right. So ESG is a worldwide movement. And so in Europe, they are working towards some reporting goals that will be come true in 2023. And so you'll be reporting on 2023 data in 2024. We expect the SEC, who came out with public comment on climate reporting requirements, we expect the final requirements to be sent out and published towards the end of this year. And then again, that reporting would be on 2023 data for 2024. What we see in the nonprofit world is that when these regulations come into play for listed companies and for private companies, that does trickle down into the nonprofit world. So yes, you can sit on your hands and wait a little while, but again, you're missing that chance to have a competitive advantage in the marketplace, and particularly when it comes to talent. And we know that's big right now.
Sounds like we need to all embrace the change, right? It is here, it is coming. So if an organization's struggling with this, I know you mentioned some things on our website that might be helpful, but where should an organization begin on their ESG journey? And maybe talk a little bit about, Mary, about internally where people should focus on having conversations.
Right. Definitely, I think you should start with your staff, find out where they stand. What are the material issues, the key issues that they care about when it comes to ESG, and take that information to your board. Because I think your board may have their eyes opened. I have heard from nonprofits that, we've got a couple of board members that are passionate about ESG, and we have a couple of, they said these words, not me, but old school board members that just don't want to pay any attention to it at all. So having that education, saying this is what our staff cares about, this is what our constituents care about, it's pretty easy to kind of get that temperature check. And again, that survey that we issue is a real nice way to do that, because we can kind of give you that third party, perspective, and also it's not a large length of time that your constituents have to spend on the survey to get those answers back. And then you can really educate your board. And then, as John was talking about, doing the board strategic planning sessions, this can be an incorporated piece of that.
Yeah. I sit on a few boards, and this is something we're talking about all the time as well. So
mhm.
definitely important. And you were just over in Europe, right? You were just over in Spain, and
Yeah.
you were speaking with the more global network about ESG. Anything about the ESG movement in Europe that you think is going to be moving its way over here to the United States pretty soon?
Yeah, I mean, they are not stopping at just publicly traded companies.
Sure.
Any company that has 250 or more employees is included. Any company that has operations in the EU. So if you're a US company, but you've got operations in the EU, you will be required to meet their sustainable finance development reporting guidelines, is what they call it. So there's a passion. What I found in being at this conference is about 120 representatives from all over the globe. There's a real passion on the part. And I mean, we're talking a lot of accountants that don't necessarily get passionate about things, but they're very excited. And we did reveal that survey where we had those results of how business owners are really doing well when they're doing good. You know, balancing that purpose and that profit is actually profitable. So they want to bring that to their clients. They want to support them. So
I'm seeing so many positive changes in the world today as it relates to these sort of initiatives, and getting in front of these now is so important. I just saw the owner, the founder of Patagonia just gave away his company to a nonprofit. That is really powerful.
So instead of shareholder, he says the only shareholder now is the globe. So yes, in Patagonia, so I mentioned that we are a certified B Corporation. Patagonia was one of the first, and they've held the highest score among B corporations through its 10-year history. So it's really, that's a company to look up to. It's amazing to see that.
Wow. Well, Mary, I really appreciate your presentation today. I know that it's probably touched so many people, and there's probably so many questions that are coming out of this. And I want everybody to know that we're a resource here. Mary's a resource for you. If you have those questions, we want to help you with those. And just really overall appreciate your leadership in the ESG space. And Mary, you've been a transformational leader at Armanino as well. I mean, you were at that cutting edge, that leading edge of helping Armanino become a certified B Corporation. And you also helped stand up the Armanino Foundation as well. And so I know you had a few things today too, you kind of wanted to share about the Armanino Foundation. So I'll let you do that here.
Yeah, I mean, today it's my invitation. If we can go to the next slide, I think. Yeah. So our Armanino Foundation really helps our firm to live out our purpose, and that is to be the most innovative and entrepreneurial firm that makes positive impact on the lives of our clients, our own people, and our communities. And we do that through the Armanino Foundation. We have grant-making programs, we provide financial literacy training, we have volunteer vacations, and we also have a program called Dollars for Doers. So Jeff, if you're out and you're volunteering at your local animal shelter, we will give a grant that is worth $10 an hour for your volunteer service. So we like to recognize those things. But today I'm talking to you about our Great Give. We at Armanino, have had the Great Give for 14 years. And this year, in May of this year, we volunteered across our firm with 100 nonprofit organizations all across the nation and 15,000 hours. And you would think, well, that's a pretty big give that the Armanino firm is doing. That's a lot of billable hours that we are giving away to the community. But it's not enough, actually. Our leadership team has decided in helping our employees to connect in this hybrid world, and we're not all in the office 5 days a week anymore. One of the things that we are going to do is create quarterly community service activities. So if we can go to the next slide, my invitation to all of you who are on the call is that if you've got some projects, if you've got some things that you need help with, we really want to hear from you, because we have offices in 24 locations across the US. We want to be able to do these quarterly community service activities, and we need to partner with you. So if you have a project that's maybe not a Great Give project, which is more like 4 to 5 hours, and it's a one day and it's in May, it's just in May. If you need activities and support throughout the year, each quarter, we're going to be doing these community service outreach. So we want to hear from you. So please just send an email, subject line community service, and that's the email address. And Kathy Wilkinson on our team, who's organizing, she's going to gather all of that. and we'll be reaching out in Q1 of next year to start setting up opportunities with you. So we're here to help you. That's my invitation.
That's so awesome, Mary. I've participated in the Great Give every year. I've done some amazing service opportunities for some of our organizations here locally. And I love the volunteer vacation as well. We do a lot of things. I know a couple years ago we went to Thailand.
Yeah.
What's your favorite volunteer vacation story you know of?
Oh gosh, well, okay, my favorite one is we were on Catalina Island, which is off the coast of California, and it's a kind of a unique ecosystem. And so we go and we do, sustainable work there. We do beach cleanup, we remove invasive species among the plants. But it's camping. We're in cots and tents, women in one tent, men in another tent, and you cook your own food. We barbecue, and so I was there. We were all working. There were 24 of us. One of our partners was on the trip, and a team member, and they were manning the barbecue. They didn't want anyone else to barbecue. They were going to cook for us. And I saw this group of 24 people from across our firm, from all different parts of the U.S., taking their plates, going to the picnic tables, and I felt this is a family. Like in that moment, it was just so emotional to me because they were having the best time, and it was as if they knew each other forever, and they just bonded on that trip. So
that's so special.
That's one of my favorite ones.
I've heard so many great stories coming from those trips. It just bonds our firm together and our people together. It's amazing. When you give, you're really the recipient,
exactly.
not the person
exactly.
who's receiving it. So anyway, well, that's really awesome. So there was one other question that came in that I just got texted to me, which was fantastic. We had somebody text and say, what sort of environmental initiatives can an organization put into place that isn't really involved in and doesn't have an environmental impact per se? They're not an environmental related organization. What can they be doing to really satisfy the E in the ESG?
I will tell you, the employees in our office are all about, let's remove the plastic. We don't want any plastic in our office. So looking at kind of your supplies and what you're using at your organization, even if you don't have an environmental bent, that's one way. Renewable energy, you can look at how can you purchase renewable energy for your operations. And then also look at the impact of commuting or business travel for your organization, and can you find a way to offset the kind of carbon footprint there. Those are three key, right off the top of my head, ideas. And actually, Armanino, as a professional services firm, we don't have a huge environmental impact, but those are key things that we are looking at our firm and improving.
Yeah, and I've noticed that too. No more straws in the office, right?
Right.
I know that's one thing. You go to a restaurant these days, you can't get a straw anymore, which is such a good thing, good impact. Okay, well, I really, really appreciate our time here.
Yeah.
I think this was really helpful. Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
So what we're going to do, we're going to take another quick break. We're going to come back right at 1 o'clock Central sharp. And so take another break, enjoy maybe grabbing some lunch, stretch your legs again. If you're like me, you need another cup of coffee. So I'm looking forward to seeing you here shortly.
All right, we've got about 1 more minute. We're going to rejoin here at 1 o'clock. That way we can make sure we get you guys out of here right on time for 2 p.m. Central Time. So just a 1 minute warning, get back to your seat or to your computer when you can, and we will get things kicked off here right about 1 o'clock.
Okay, well, we made it to our last session of the day. I'm excited about this one as well. I'd like to introduce a powerhouse panel here to discuss social impact and take us on a deep dive into data analysis and the ways utilizing data and innovative technology can prepare you for future disruption and enable you to better deliver on your mission. So I'm going to introduce our panelist here. Stacy Kowalczyk is a partner at Armanino and a leader in our nonprofit industry practice, and will moderate our discussion today. And joining her is our panel, Alex Jerfy, a senior manager of product development and innovation at Armanino, and Claire Ugo Ike, who leads who's a lead evaluation analyst and data guru. I love that, data guru, for the American Heart Association. So with that, Stacy, the floor is yours. Take it away.
All right, well, thanks everyone. I'm really excited for this panel, and I'm really excited to be joined by Claire and Alex. I did want to give a shout out to Dion Brodish. She's the Vice President of the Social Impact Fund at American Heart Association. She was not able to join us today. I know she's in the audience today, but just wanted to give a big shout out to her today as well. So we're going to be talking a lot about social impact analysis today, what it means and why it matters. You heard in the last session, Mary talked a lot about ESG overall, so we're going to focus on the S. We're going to lead off with a little bit of market trend and data and information, and then Claire is going to tell us about the American Heart Association story, how their social impact fund was started and how they measure impact. But before we do, I think we're going to go into our first polling question.
Thanks, Stacy. All right, we're going to kick things off with a polling question. How important do you feel it is for nonprofit organizations to report out on their social impact? I know this is going to be really relevant to today's discussion. So, first polling question of this session, how important do you feel it is for nonprofit organizations to report on their social impact? Very important, not important, unsure. What even is social impact analysis?
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see what we get here.
Yeah. Give everybody a few moments. Again, I know we're in the home stretch for the day, guys, so get in those answers. How important do you feel it is for nonprofit organizations to report out on social impact? Very important, not important, unsure. What the heck is social impact analysis? Give you guys 1 or 2 more moments, get those answers in. And I think we can probably close it.
All right, so it looks like 75% of you said that it's very important, so it's great to see that. A small portion of you, about 16% or so, said that you were unsure. So hopefully we can maybe change your thoughts or your strategy about how you're thinking from a forward-looking perspective today. So with that, we'll go ahead and get into our first slide here. So Alex, again, thank you for joining us. So Alex is a leader in our product development division within Armanino, specifically developing products for the nonprofit industry. Alex and his team are often known as ideaticians within the walls of Armanino. That's a really big word. That's kind of hard to say. So Alex, I wanted to just get started with you. Tell us about how you define social impact analysis and some of the benefits that it provides to the nonprofit organizations and kind of what you've seen with the work that you and your team are doing.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Stacy. Really happy to be here, and interesting, right, to see some of those polling results, right? It seems like we have a really sharp audience that's passionate about making a positive impact. But for maybe some of those people who are a bit unsure, right, social impact analysis is really just the process and activities around measuring the impact and benefits of your work. Sort of extending right beyond some of the financial metrics at Armanino. We live in financial statements, right? And that social component, right, really focuses on sort of broadening that impact and capturing the true value to your communities. A common sort of word or phrase that you'll run into, right, is social return on investment or social ROI, right, which is really sort of a practice of applying monetary values to economic, social, and environmental outcomes, and can help identify how effective an organization is in creating value and utilizing their capital resources in their communities. Now, this can be really hard, right? And I think you'll attest, Claire, sort of doing these calculations, right? How can you assign monetary value, for examples like programs that increase access to education or healthcare, or a statewide initiative that reduces recidivism, right? There are lots of data and variables and different time horizons. Sometimes, right, you need to even blend in a little bit of social science and academic research, but this is where we love to play, right, sort of being the data junkies. But I think you'll see right through Claire's story that organizations that are able to do this, right, it really unlocks a lot of potential. I have a colleague that often says, what gets measured gets done. And so I think that really resonates with me. I think organizations, right, that go on this journey of trying to measure their impact or do these social ROI calculations can really get a deeper understanding into their best practices, success criteria, as well as costs in their impact area. I think this data information, right, can also be a powerful tool for development and communicating to sophisticated funders as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Claire's going to get into that a little bit later. Alex, I know you've told me more than once that you love working with the social sector just because of all the people out there and all the organizations that are just so passionate about making an impact. So it's amazing to be able to talk further about this today. And I know that you and your group have done a lot of market research. So can you share some of those market trends with us and kind of delve a little bit more into those details?
Yeah, happy to. And right, we've talked a lot today about disruption and obviously exponential change brought on by technology. And one of those byproducts, right, is we have greatly increased our access to information. Get supercomputers in our pockets, right? We've sort of grown accustomed to having information at our fingertips, immediate answers to our questions, right? And this influences human behavior as well as our social, economic, and political engagement. And so one of the ways, right, that we're seeing this manifest itself in the nonprofit sector is donors and stakeholders, right, demanding more transparency and metrics into the impact nonprofit organizations are having and what they're achieving through those contributions. So at the end of last year, Salesforce surveyed over 1,000 nonprofit professionals, and those results, right, provided some interesting insights into these trends. So to go through a couple of these real quick, 30% of the respondents, right, indicated that demonstrating impact measurements to current and prospective donors was a major issue. 72% said that their donors now expect remote access to KPIs and metrics around their impact. That same percentage, almost 3 out of 4, said they have plans to show real-time KPIs on their website. And then 31% have already provided recently this capability to their donors, with the overwhelming majority saying that it's impactful. And so as we look at some of these statistics, right, and connecting back to a quote that Trista shared earlier, right, that today is giving us clues about tomorrow, right? I think if we look into the crystal ball, right, I think social impact analysis and investing is going to play a bigger role in operations development and sort of the digital strategy for nonprofits.
Yeah, absolutely. I know when we saw the session earlier today with John Stewart and John Mcbride and Thomas Brewer, they talked a lot about like just the transformation that they're doing within their walls. And could you imagine having to report out to a donor, you know, as you mentioned with that statistic and not having that technology to be able to help you leverage and do that? That would be cumbersome. That would be hard, right? With just that high of expectation. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're going to move to another polling question now.
Yes, thanks, Stacy. We've got our second polling question for this session. Does your organization currently report on social impact for specific programs or funding streams? Yes, no, we're looking into it. Make sure we get those answers in. Again, I know we're home stretch, last session of the day, you guys.
Well, we hope that we're going to convince everyone to look into it if we're answering no.
Does your organization currently report out on social impact for specific programs or funding streams? Yes, no, we're looking at it. Get those answers in for me, please. We'll give you guys a few more moments. Get those answers in. Yes, no, we're looking into it. Does your organization currently report on social impact for specific programs or funding streams? All right, 1 or 2 more moments and we'll go ahead and get that one closed. Okay.
All right, so it looks like, wow, it's tied. So about 44% of the audience on both sides answered yes, that your organization currently does report. Another 44% said no, and 14% of you said that you're looking into it. So interesting responses there. I think that, this next section, where Claire will talk about, what you've done at the American Heart Association. I'm absolutely positive that, after Claire is done talking about the work that they've done, that this is something that's going to be important to everyone. So Claire, I talked to you and to Dion, earlier this summer, just about the Social Impact Fund that you started back in 2018. And you really talked about, I really heard about how it's helped the American Heart Association advance your mission. So tell us a little bit about the history of the fund and, sort of what's important. What was important from your perspective, and maybe just like kind of a sneak preview of what's important in terms of the long-term strategic plan.
Absolutely. Thank you, first of all, Stacy, for inviting us. And a big shout out to Dion. I know you are there in the audience. And also to you, Alex, for providing that powerful background on social impact analysis and setting the stage for me to share our story from the American Heart Association. And so for us, the Social Impact Fund is actually complementing the work of life-saving that AHA has been doing over almost nearly 100 years. And everybody knows AHA as an organization that helps to prevent heart disease through research and science. And so about 10 years ago, the AHA, focuses to deepen our work on health equity to address structural racism across the different communities and address some economic and social barriers to health equity. And so to reach our 2024 impact goal, we actually made 10 bold commitments. And the second of those commitments was to raise and invest about $100 million in different community-led solutions. And these solutions are solutions that help to address economic, social, and health needs across the different communities, addressing social determinants of health issues, helping to break those barriers to health equity. And so we are working to support several communities because we believe that every community knows what problem they have, and we believe that the solution is in the community. So we want to support them to be able to address the needs of the community. And so as an organization, we work with several donors to help advance this goal of investing across the different communities and investing across different solutions to address social determinants of health.
So if we think about, as I mentioned, we talked earlier this summer, you and Dion both told me that heart health, for American Heart Association, what you do and the clients and the community that you serve, it doesn't just stop with a visit to the doctor. And that really resonated with me. You talked further about that community impact and the work that you do and how it makes an impact in people's lives, even just from a standpoint of extending their lives. So can you tell us a little bit more just in terms of like the key goals in those 3 impact areas that you mentioned? Can you talk a little bit more about the specifics on how you continue to close that gap in the community and enrich the lives of the community that you serve?
Sure. Thank you for that question. What is powerful about the work we do at the Social Impact Fund is the fact that we are investing in the community to solve the problems in the community by the community themselves. So that's one powerful thing about what we do. And so what we do is to provide, access to capital for the different community-based organizations, small and medium entrepreneurs, to address social determinants of health and ensure that the barriers, the social and economic barriers to health equity are actually broken. And in addition to that, we work to combat structural inequities through the approach that we take in sourcing our investees, and that approach is making sure that it's barrier-free, it's very inclusive. So because we know that small and medium-sized entrepreneurs, mostly those that are led by minority group, people of color, women, are really neglected. They are underfunded. And so we try to make it more inclusive. We open our arms so that everybody that has solutions that are impactful, that can help address these structural issues in the communities, we open our arms so that they can all apply for this fund, and we make it all inclusive and barrier-free. And so in addition to that, we make sure that we accelerate and scale innovative ideas and share lessons and best practices based on our portfolio. And also, we are very dynamic in addressing the needs of our portfolio, because we know that there's no one size that fits all. So we ensure that we are working on the most pressing needs of the community. So not just because we think that this is a solution that we want to implement, but we look at the community, what is the challenge that they are facing in the community, and we dynamically invest so that they can address the direct need of the community.
Yeah. It's great hearing about the diversity and equity and inclusion aspects of how you're describing your goals, how you structure your goals and execute them. And I know you're going to talk a little bit more later on about how the portfolio and the approach is not a one size fits all. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Absolutely. And so our fund, we are focusing on 3 main social determinants of health pillars. One is access to health and healthcare, including mental health services. And so we invest in solutions that help break barriers to access to health. And barriers like transportation. For example, someone that is hungry, that has not seen food, I don't have money to buy food, I may not have money to transport myself to the hospital, right? So we invest in medical logistics, transport people that transport people to hospitals. We invest in technology, so that some of our solutions are for the mental health services are technology based, so that people that feel like maybe people of color that feel that they don't want to actually go to the hospital because of stigma, they can actually have a way of still meeting that mental health needs without them, feeling that effect of stigma. And we also invest in solutions around solutions that help to address communication barriers like medical translation, because we know that some people may not have access to the healthcare providers because they are not able to understand what the provider is saying, or even being able to communicate their disease states to the provider. And the second pillar we're also focusing on is food security. And in food security, we take a food ecosystem approach. We're not just funding maybe food availability, but we try to look at the entire food ecosystem, making sure that we have food available, we make food accessible, and we also encourage good dietary behavior. So we fund solutions that, like farmers that help produce food, and also solutions that help transport this food to the local communities, or that help to make it accessible by having several pop-up markets across the different locations so that people in the rural areas can have access to healthy food. And we also fund solutions that help to encourage good dietary behavior, because we know that that's a very proxy indicator to health. And so solutions that help to demonstrate, cooking of healthy food, that help to provide nutritional education, like what the SNAP Ed is doing, we also fund that. And then the third pillar that we are also focusing on is economic resilience and poverty reduction. So solutions that address barriers to education, that address barriers to employment, housing solution, and also solutions that help to prevent recidivism. We fund such solutions.
So it sounds like it's really important for your portfolio that you have on the investment side to really work for you in terms of being able to make the most impact in these three areas, the determinants of social health that you mentioned.
Absolutely.
So what does the portfolio look like? And can you talk about maybe strategic partnerships that you've made along the way to grow the portfolio and to further the impact of the work that you're doing in these impact areas?
Absolutely. So currently we're in 16 markets, and we've actually were able to raise about $32 million, or a little over that, $2 million from philanthropic donors. And we've invested this $2 million in about 98 organizations, small and medium size, for-profit and non-for-profit organizations across these different communities. And the most important thing is that 92% of these portfolio members, we call them like the investees, are people of color and women. And also we invest more than 80% of this money back into the community. But the one key important thing that I would like you to know is that the $32 million that we've raised from donors have actually catalyzed 128 million from other investments, other funding from other sources to these small, medium-sized organizations, medium-sized entrepreneurs. And so we encourage them, we work with them to be able to apply for more funding because of our relationship with them. We support them, and because of the trust that other funders that originally neglected them have found in them, because they are working with AHA, they are able to now be open to funding them. So we've been able to support them to attract about $128 million, or even a little more than that by now.
It's amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing. I don't think I really appreciated before the impact, some of those points that you've mentioned. It's very important, I think, for everyone to hear. Hopefully we're changing your minds about social impact funds and reporting. I just want to get back to that. That's so important. All right, I think we're going to move on to our next polling question.
Thanks, Stacy. So this is going to be our third polling question for this session. True or false? Boards and governance committees must set the tone at the top for strategic initiatives. True or false? Very interested to see the results on this one. True or false? Boards and governance committees must set the tone at the top for strategic initiatives. Let's make sure we get those answers in. We're closing in on the home stretch here, so get those answers in as quickly as you guys can. True or false? Boards and governance committees must set the tone at the top for strategic initiatives. True or false? I'll give you guys a few more moments to get those answers in for us. True or false? A couple more moments here. Okay, I think we can close that one off. Okay.
Well, good. I'm glad to see these responses. 97% of you said true. And I know from working with my clients and the nonprofit community out there that yes, it's very important to have that tone at the top. And the board governance support 110% for any strategic initiatives or projects that the organization's doing, especially important initiatives like this that deal with social impact. So Claire, I'm interested to hear from you at American Heart Association. How did your board sort of mobilize and support and promote and continue to support the ongoing efforts of the fund? If you can just take a little minute or two and tell us about that, because I think that's important. You know, with respect to what we're talking about here, I think it's important to understand the board's mindset and the board's support.
Absolutely. And so currently, the Social Impact Fund is managed by a team that includes the Social Impact Fund director, 3 portfolio managers, and me, the lead evaluation analyst, and another evaluation analyst. But above that, we have the governance committee that comprises of the best in health and business leaders that oversee and provide strategic leadership to the fund. So they provide strategic support and oversight on the investment process, and also they are the ones that approve every investment. So once we finish our sourcing and we provide get evidence that we need to invest in this community or in this investee, and we provide the investment thesis. So we go through that, and then they approve or deny whatever the funding. But basically, we go through very rigorous sourcing process and due diligence. So most of our investments are approved by them. So they provide that leadership and support.
Yeah, the tone at the top is so very important. And Claire, you're the lead analyst on this particular project, this particular fund for American Heart Association. So I know that what we're going to get into next is questions around what you do best and where your expertise lies. So I'm curious to hear, just about the guiding principles and sort of the measurement evaluation process, what that looks like. So starting out with, what type of process do you have to make sure that you are starting to report out and you're reporting out in a way that is meaningful to your users and donors? Tell us a little bit about that.
So first of all, our social impact measurement, we understand that, it's not just about measurement, but it's about being inclusive and including the voices of the investees, because they are the ones implementing these solutions. So we try to make it more participatory and engage them from the outset. So we try to understand how much change our investments and the activities of the investees has actually helped to contribute to the big impact in solving the problems in the community. And we emphasize on sustainability. We emphasize on long-term impact. We're not just funding patches, we fund pathway to impact. So we make sure that in our investment process, we provide capacity building so that they will, even though when they exit the investment process, they continue making impact across different community. And so our investment, like I said, is impact first. We focus more on the impact the investees are going to make, rather than considering what we're going to get as an investor. And also our investments are community-centered. So we make sure that the solutions come from the community, because they understand the problems, the needs, the social needs, the economic needs, the health needs that they have. And also we focus on evidence, making sure that impact measurement is at the heart of what we do. So we focus on evidence in our investment, and we invest in highest social return on investment. So because we try to look at solutions and assess them, so which solution is going to make more impact, we invest in those solutions.
So I imagine, with that said, you, and especially with your long-term sort of plan and strategic outlook, I imagine you need to have a pretty robust process with milestones and a framework that incorporates that, so you can sort of check in at every step of the way, and analyze data, gather information that's going to help you make decisions in the future. Tell us a little bit about that framework.
Right. So from the outset, we understand that measurement is the core of what, because what gets measured gets done, right?
Right.
And so we designed our social impact fund evaluation framework, and that framework helps us to gather both process and outcome data, and also make sure that we provide capacity building across the investment cycle, so that people will keep continuing to collect data and measure the effort of the things that they do in the community. And so we, once the investees, once we bring them on the investment process, we do milestone, we develop milestones with them. And so that milestone that we develop with them, we have quarterly check-in, milestone check-in at every quarter, to make sure that those milestones, that they are implementing the milestone according to the grant agreement, and also conduct some structural conversation around what has worked, what has changed, are there challenges, how do we help to solve some of the challenges that they are having in the throughout the implementation of the solutions. And so we do the milestone check-in, and we do social return on investment, and in that we try to analyze and assess our investment with economic lens, looking at what value has been created, and also looking at where is best for us to invest our dollars. And then the last piece is the outcome evaluation, which we do for most of our investment, not all. We have several criteria that we use to select who to do outcome evaluation for. For the outcome evaluation, we try to assess the effectiveness of the solution and the approach and the strategies, to make sure that to understand what has worked, what has changed. If it has not worked, why? How do we, what do we learn from this process? How can we replicate the innovation? How can we scale up? If it did not work, then where is the problem? Where do we make changes so that we can continue, adjusting the process, for future investment? And also at the heart of this whole process is the capacity building, because we want to make sure that the community solutions, that they keep making impact. The community, the investees keep making impact even after they exit the investment process. And so we build their capacity on evaluation, on data collection, on, we'll help them to institute their organizational evaluation framework, like helping them to develop logic model, so that they will see their program graphically, how does our effort lead to the impact. That will give them like a guideline and a plan on how to measure the effort of the work that they're doing in the community. And so all of this we do for every investment. It's kind of like a cycle.
Yeah. That sounds like, right, you sort of help coach these organizations, right, how they can sort of do this social impact analysis themselves and on an ongoing basis, right, once your investment period's ended. So that's why you're the data guru.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious if you find in terms of the social impact level, if you're finding that the dollars invested aren't returning what you expected in terms of the impact, do you continue to work with those investees to revise and refine? Do you ever find yourself having to just switch gears entirely?
So we have a process, we have a roadmap that leads to that. And so like I mentioned, that we create the milestones, and we work with them to create the milestones. And then I work with the portfolio managers to develop the evaluation plan that help us, guide us in evaluating the investment. And then the portfolio managers, they set, the check-in, quarterly check-in meetings with the investees. And so throughout that process of quarterly check-in, data collection, process data collection, we try to understand if anything, if there's anything that needs adjustment, and then we start collecting data, start discussing evaluation, start discussing, answering questions related to evaluation, because sometimes these groups are very new to, impact investment space, and they're also new. They have the solution, but they are new organization, right?
Yeah.
They may not have done evaluation before, and they have lots of questions, but we try as much as possible to make them understand that evaluation is not about policing what to do, but about helping you to see the impact of the work that you're doing across the different communities. And so we answered, those questions during the check-in meetings as well. And then we start the evaluation process. And the last piece of the check-in meeting is, reflecting on the results, reflecting on the process, reviewing the results, the achievement, the challenges, and understanding what next. So to answer your question about discussing what next, whether we're going to reinvest or whether they are going to continue making impact based on the size of the organization and the capacity of the organization, because that's our goal, is to make sure that they don't leave the investment cycle the way they came in, right? Mm-hmm. So by actually helping them to increase the size of the funding that they have for the organization, and also increase their capacity to be able to, address solution in it, and make it more scalable. And so it depends on the level of the investee at that point and the performance of the investee that can help us to decide whether we are going to reinvest or not.
So it sounds like this is where that one size fits all definitely does not. That's definitely false. That is not true, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So you have to scale and help each individual investee in a manner that works for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it looks like you've really developed, right, a flexible and agile process, right, with these check-ins. We're coming from the technology world, right? I almost think of like agile software development, right? As market conditions change, right? You're constantly reevaluating your assumptions, collecting data around your performance, and able to adjust on the fly. And seems very resilient in this, right? Being able to constantly adapt.
You two would be a great team with your ideas
We are
and
already,
execution and product development. I love it.
We are ready.
I love it. Well, Claire, I think, I think what you are going to talk about next is probably the most valuable point in the discussion today, is your model. So take us through your model and give us some examples of how the model works in the real world, the real situation for our audience.
Absolutely, thank you. So in addition to the evaluation framework that we developed, we also sat back to design the logic model that graphically represents our program, telling us how the resources that we are putting into solving these health, economic, and social needs, how they all lead to the several levels of result, both short-term, intermediate term, and long-term, and then to the impact. And so we have two sets of activities. The first activity are the activities of the Impact Investment Group, which is us working at the American Heart Association. So the things that we do, like the sourcing, the due diligence, the portfolio management, the evaluation process. And then the next set of activity are the activities of the portfolio members, which are the investees, them implementing the community-based solution and also engaging the community members while implementing. And so these activities all leads to several outputs. For example, the activities of the investee, for example, doing activities that help to lead to access to healthcare. So when they do these activities in the community, for example, access to healthcare related activities, people in the community are able to access healthcare. They're able to, someone that doesn't really have insurance, but qualify for insurance but doesn't know the process, can now get insurance and now be able to see a healthcare provider, right? So that person has access to healthcare. And then for that kind of person that originally you are not able to see a health provider, you might get sick and you now spend more money to take care of yourself, right? Whereas if you are able to access healthcare earlier on, you may now find out that, there are things that you can do to prevent you getting sick. So those activities can lead to reduced healthcare costs, in the long run. And all of the activities that they are doing that helps to address barriers to health, help to address barriers to employment, help to address barriers to some economic improvement, and help to address barriers to food, can all lead to reducing health disparities, and then people are now able to live longer, healthier lives. So all of these activities lead to several short term results leading to other results logically. So each set of results logically leads to another set of results that will help in the long term, help us to address the impact. And we have two big impacts. One is reducing health disparities, and the second impact is improving healthy life expectancy. So all of these activities in the long term help to address, reach those two impacts.
I think connecting back to some of the sort of strategy and transformation and strategic plan initiatives, right? You were sort of explaining to me this helps you sort of move backwards, right? And making sure all of sort of these short-term activities and investments and projects, right, roll up to those key impact areas. And I think also like some of the value, right, in looking at this logic model, right, is really understanding the time horizon.
Absolutely.
Right? It takes a long time to see if the courageous work that your investees are doing really makes a material impact on life expectancy in a community, and right. So I think it shows that as nonprofits embark on this journey, right, it is a long-term process, and lots of data collection, monitoring, right, similar back to your roadmap. But right, I think this is a helpful blueprint, right, for other folks to see how you're tackling these impact areas and sort of how you're defining and monitoring data across this journey.
Yeah, and because we know that there are different time horizons, and some of these results take some time to achieve. That's why we're doing the capacity building, so that it doesn't really stop at what we're able to achieve when we're in the investment process, but also goes beyond them being part of AHA Investee and continuing to collect that data, and then looking back to where they started. What have we achieved in the long term? Are we making impact? Are we is our achievement and trajectory directed to the big impact that AHA and all of them, because all of their objectives are all aligned to reducing health disparities. So that's why we do that capacity building, to make sure that they continue making impact and continue measuring the impact that they're making across the different communities.
Well, and how great to be able to, on the impact side of it, how great to be able to report out to your constituents that you are, you're expanding life expectancy, and you're also reducing healthcare costs.
Absolutely.
Right? That's huge. That is so impactful.
So Claire, as I look at this logic model, right, lots of different pieces and data, and so as, again, sort of the technology nerd over here, how do you go about sort of collecting all of this information? Again, right, you talked about integrating the voice of stakeholders. How do you sort of work with these various groups and sort of enable this whole process through technology?
Thank you so much, Alex. That's a great question. So we, like I mentioned earlier, we work with them to develop the outcome, the milestones and the outcomes, and also look at what indicators are we actually looking at, what are the KPIs that we're using to track the performance. And we have a platform called Ethos Giving. That Ethos Giving platform is a performance measurement platform that helps us to collect data across our different social determinants of health focus areas. And so each investee has the data collection tool that they use to, upload the data to this platform. So it makes it like, it's a centralized area where everybody uploads their data. And once you upload data related to food access, it goes directly to that pool. But at the end of the day, from the back end, we're able to see all of the data collected. We're able to aggregate the data across the different social determinants of health pillars. And we're also able to analyze the data to tell us the impact we are making across different markets, across different regions, across the different communities. And also helps us to know what impact is actually linked to what donor. Right. So every donor has like several organizations that they funded. So once they upload the data, we can connect all of the data to a particular donor. So that helps us to, to see all of those through surveys and, through data aggregation analysis. So.
And how do your donors sort of feel about some of these reporting capabilities, right? Some of this transparency, and is it well received? Are people enthusiastic around this platform?
Absolutely. We have our aggregate impact slide that shows the impact we've made over the past 2.5 years across the different, social determinants of health pillars. And over time, we've reached about 1.6 million people, helping them to address social determinants of health needs and, and improving their lives across health and healthcare, food security, economic resilience, and poverty reduction. And we have, so when we share these numbers, people are amazed because for just 2 years plus, we've done so much. And for the fact that our solutions are coming from the community, is kind of not really like a top to bottom approach, but bottom up, because they understand the best way to reach the people and the best way to address these needs. And so we use this data, for donor reporting. We use it to optimize our impact, and we also share the data with prospective donors to see the impact we are making across the different markets and across the different, social determinants of health pillar.
So I have one, maybe I might be a little bit of a technology junkie as well. I had one other question. I didn't talk with you before on this slide, this particular slide, but what do your donors and your other stakeholders, do they actually have access to view their own information within this platform, or to view it real time and look at the information like that? Or is this something that you just do as part of like the roadmap and the process that you explain that you're providing to them on an ongoing basis?
So the investees, they have access to this platform, and they're able to see their data, the data that they reported over time. But the donors don't have access to the platform. But we aggregate all of the data, and it's a very transparent platform. So I don't know if I don't know what will happen, but none of the donors has actually asked us to give them access to the platform. But then it's transparent. All the data there are there, and then we're able to aggregate the data across different different pool of social determinants of health needs, and across different pool of donors and all that. So the investees have access definitely, but the donors don't have access at least yet.
Yeah, it's I think it kind of goes back to some of the discussions we had in the earlier sessions today. It's just that access to technology and that access to real-time reporting is so important, because otherwise stakeholders, whether they're investees or donors, could be waiting months, even if it's a few weeks, right? Like they need that information to make decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing is that they don't have access like them going into the platform, but we have real-time result that we can report, on the go. So whenever they need any data, or they want to send report to each donor, we can just it's kind of like plug and play. It's very, very user friendly. So we just open up the platform, and we're able to generate data.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one last question, did you get capital funding or capital infusion to help you with this platform, the technology aspects of managing the Social Impact Fund?
So American Heart Association, we are really very, we're very particular about, measurement and evidence. And so we have, as part of the support that we get from, from the different teams, we have the data science team within the American Heart Association that helps us with, technology, artificial intelligence, and, all of those. However, this particular platform was funded by the American Heart Association because we know the importance of data. We kind of moved from a particular system. We've been using a particular system called Flux, but we noticed that the investees are kind of having some challenges with using that system. And then we now transited to this system that is more user-friendly and helps them to, to upload their data more frequently and very, very easily accessible, very user-friendly. So,
awesome. All right, well, I think we're going on to our last polling question of the session.
Thanks, Stacy. All right, final polling question of the session. Is it achievable to implement a roadmap and measurable metrics to measure social impact performance at your organization? Yes, no, yes with some additional help and guidance. We wouldn't even know where to start. So get those answers in. And Stacy, I think you've got a couple of other slides before we move into Q&A, right?
Yeah, just one last comment actually, and just maybe another quick short discussion with Claire while the audience is responding to the poll. By the way, for the audience, I hope everyone is a believer now in the importance of social impact reporting. So earlier today, Trista talked a lot about finding your future and essentially having a shared strategy and picture of what that future and what that vision looks like and the importance of that. So, just kind of hearing you talk today, it sounds like, definitely you have really found that with the work that you're doing with the Social Impact Fund. But I mean, it sounds like you are helping your investees also in the project work that you do. You're helping them to find that same shared future in the community and the community impact. Would you agree with that? And how do you plan to, what's the next step, just kind of broadly?
Absolutely. So recently we developed our strategic plan that can help us, that can guide us as we implement and as we're investing in the next few years. And currently, most of the fundings are coming from, philanthropic donors, and we're currently in the 16 markets. So the next step, we want to expand to other markets. We want to include environmental. We want to, address some environmental needs as social determinant of health, not just doing food security, economic resiliency, and access to health, but also looking at some of the environmental factors that also, pose as barrier to health equity as well. And so we intend to grow our capital. We intend to grow our pool of investees. We intend to, enter into other markets, consolidating what we are doing in several markets, and making sure that our investees are scaling the innovation, the innovative ideas that they are implementing across the different communities.
I remember when you first showed me that impact slide, you had a huge smile on your face, right? And it's something you guys are really proud of, and right, I think that speaks to some of these other themes too, right? Sort of the ability to really measure your impact, quantify it, right? Unlock some of those sort of employee satisfaction experience, right? This is the impact that we're having across that portfolio, and even people like me think it's awesome to see those figures and the amazing work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Alex. Thank you.
Absolutely. So we'll go ahead and close the poll here.
Yeah,
real
let's
quick.
go ahead and close the poll. I hope you guys got those answers in.
So yes, it looks like a lot of you said that it's achievable to implement a roadmap. That's good to see. About 40% of you on your own, and then about another 47% said yes with some additional help and guidance. So Claire, I hope that you continue, and American Heart Association, you continue to spread the word about what you're doing, and you'll be available to all of our 675 guests today nationwide to help them implement their particular projects. And Alex, thank you for all the ideas and the content. Alex is going to continue to do some great work in product development in the nonprofit space.
Thank you so much, Stacy and Alex, and thank you all.
Yeah, before I let you guys go, I got a question that just came in on my phone from the internet. I thought it was a great question, so I wanted to ask. It said, the roadmap that you shared seems very flexible and fluid. Do you ever have complexities adjusting the model across a variety of projects? We heard you say multiple times that it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Absolutely. And so that roadmap is as the name implies, roadmap. So it helps us, know what's next step to take until we get to the end of the investment cycle. However, we understand that things can change, culturally, just like what happened during the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, we have one investee that was implementing health care-related solution, helping to address high blood pressure issues in the community. So the solution is about high blood pressure control among people in the community, mostly Black people in the community. And they were supposed to enroll the community members through some community structures like churches. And then COVID-19 pandemic happened. Everywhere is closed.
Yep.
But people still go to the hospital, right? And so we had that, conversation on, this is a challenge that we're having. How do we pivot from, based on what's going on, how do we pivot? And then they came up with the solution of, instead of, enrolling patients from the community, they can go through the hospital system, the hospital in the community, because that's where people go to. And also the hospital, because that was a very great idea, because hospital know exactly who has reported high blood pressure, issue in the hospital. So we see that it doesn't really happen all the time, but we see that happen sometimes when during that conversation, investors can come up with, we have this, we know that this solution works, but we have this challenge, because when you are setting the plan, you don't know the future. Things can happen, things can change, right? And so we are very flexible and dynamic in our investment to make sure that we are actually solving the most pressing need in the community, not just, we're focusing more on what is the most pressing need in the community and making that adjustment. So I love that question. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, well, Stacy, Alex, and Claire, thank you so much for that incredible discussion around the power of data in shaping our futures. And also, I want to thank all of you for attending this year's symposium. And one more special thanks to all of our sponsors that sponsored the day for us and made this day possible: Sage Intact, Citibank, and TriNet. Also, if I might also add, thank you to Trista Harris for allowing me to have this Oprah Winfrey moment. She has graciously agreed to share her book for free with anybody who attended our symposium. So look for an email from us with a link to download that. And also a quick reminder to complete your post-event evaluations. You'll receive those. That's going to help you obtain CPE credit for attending today. And so thank you again. We're grateful that you had the opportunity to spend what is a large portion of your day with us, and we look forward to connecting with each of you very soon. So have a great afternoon, and until next year, see you guys later.